Hello everyone, welcome to Dreamland Encounters. Tonight we dive into the dark side of Men in Black, story that has not been said. Let the community know how far these stories reach. Tell it in the comments. Now relax and enjoy. It started with the lights. I'd seen them before, but never that clear. It was just past midnight, maybe closer to 1 o'clock. I was out by the edge of the soybean fields behind my place in Franklin, Illinois. Nothing fancy, just open land and grain silos and gravel roads. I'd gone out there with my phone because it was dead quiet and the stars were bright. I do that sometimes when I can't sleep, just walk. I saw the lights hovering low over the far end of the field, 3 of them, pale white, no blinking, just hanging there, maybe 30 feet above the ground, no sound at all. I zoomed in and started filming. The lights didn't move, didn't shift, just hung there like they were waiting for something. At one point, they started to drift slow and smooth all at once, like they were connected. Then they paused, rotated, not the lights themselves, but the way they were arranged, like the whole thing was turning in place, then glided sideways, silent as air. It gave me goosebumps. You expect some sort of drone noise or hum. Nothing. It was like the whole world held its breath. I filmed for maybe 2 minutes. Didn't say anything in the video, just stood there. Eventually the lights eased back and disappeared into the tree. I walked home. By the time I got inside, I had full bars of service again. I clipped the best 30 seconds and posted it to TikTok. No hashtags, just the caption. Anyone else seeing this over Franklin right now? I went to bed after that. Didn't think much of it. Figured I'd get a couple dozen views. Maybe someone in town would comment. I didn't check it again until the next morning. When I opened the app, the video had blown up. Tens of thousands of views overnight. Comments pouring in. People saying it matched stuff they'd seen in Indiana, Missouri, even Oregon. A few skeptics saying it was fake, that it was CGI. Whatever. I was just trying to make sense of it. It was around 8:30 when the knock came. 2 quick raps. I looked through the people and saw them. 2 men, identical black suits, white shirts, narrow black ties. Both wore those old-style sunglasses, the ones with thin black frames and dark lenses. Hair short, slicked back, identical height, identical build, like brothers or copies. I opened the door, maybe halfway, left the screen shut. The one on the left smiled immediately, wide, no teeth, just lips pressed together in this perfect crescent. The one on the right did the same about half a second later. I remember thinking it looked rehearsed. "Mr. Professor Daya, Porter?" the left one asked. His voice was flat, like it was being played through a speaker with the bass turned down. "Yeah," I said. "What's this about?" He tilted his head, still smiling. "Just checking in, making sure you've been feeling safe lately." I didn't say anything right away. My mouth kind of opened like I was about to respond, but my brain hadn't caught up. The question didn't make sense. "I guess," I said. "Why?" "No reason," the other one said. Exact same voice, same tone. "You've just had a busy night." They both nodded slowly, still smiling. I started to feel this tightness in my chest. Not like a panic attack, more like when a cop pulls behind you and you know you didn't do anything wrong, but your whole body tenses anyway. I asked who they were with. They didn't answer, just said, "We appreciate your cooperation," and turned around in unison. Same stride, same posture. I watched them walk down the sidewalk to a black sedan parked at the curb. Not a government plate, just regular Illinois tags. They got in at the same time and sat there for maybe 5 more seconds before driving off. They never asked about the video, never mentioned the footage or TikTok or anything specific. Just busy night, just feeling safe. I shut the door and locked it. I went straight to my desktop in the other room to check the video again, but the app said, "This video is no longer available." I thought maybe it got reported or flagged for some reason. But there were no notices, no takedown messages, just gone like it had never existed. I figured I still had the raw file on my hard drive. I always save anything I film to my backup folder, but when I tried to boot up the drive, it just clicked a few times and spun down, not even showing up in Disk Manager. Completely dead. I hadn't touched it since last night. I pulled it out of the enclosure and tried it on another PC I keep in the garage. Same thing. Clicks, spin, then silence. Not even the BIOS picked it up. I checked my cloud sync. Nothing. It had been off that night, like always, because my internet's too slow to auto-upload big files. The only copy had been local. That's when I realized how quiet the house had gotten. Like, too quiet. I don't have pets or kids, but even then there's usually some kind of background hum. But it was just dead air for maybe a minute straight. Like everything stopped. Then I heard a car door. I looked out the front window, but the street was empty. No one walking, no cars parked, just my truck and the neighbor's old Pontiac. I closed the curtains and sat in the hallway, kind of half expecting them to come back. They didn't, but I couldn't shake that feeling, like I was being watched, even inside my own place. Around noon, I tried logging into my TikTok account. Password wasn't working. I requested a reset link. Nothing came. Not to my inbox, not to spam. I even tried logging in from another device. Said the account didn't exist. I went back to check the video's comments from links people had sent me. Dead ends, content not found. Any site that had embedded it, Reddit, Twitter, even some UFO forums. It was just gone, replaced by blank thumbnails. Or 404 errors. The weirdest part was when I tried restoring the video from a recovery tool. I ran 3 different programs. All of them found fragments of old files, stuff from months ago, family photos, whatever, but nothing with a timestamp from last night. No trace of any recording from that night at all. It was like the file had never been saved. Later that afternoon, I went into town. Figured I'd talk to someone who might have seen the lights too. I ran into Ben Holloway at the gas station. He's a hunter, lives 2 roads over. When I asked if he'd seen anything weird in the sky the night before, he gave me this look and said, "Like what?" "Just lights." I said, "Over the fields real low." "No sound." He shook his head. "Nah, nothing like that." But the way he said it, fast and clipped, made me think he didn't want to talk about it. I tried a few other folks, mostly shrugs or polite confusion. One woman at the hardware store said she'd heard dogs barking like crazy around 1 a.m. but thought it was coyotes. I haven't filmed anything since then. My new hard drive works fine, but I check it every day just to make sure it hasn't bricked like the last one. Haven't posted on TikTok either, not even logged in. The sedan hasn't come back, not that I've seen, but sometimes at night, especially when I'm out back, I get this sense that something's there just beyond the tree line. Not watching exactly, more like waiting. I don't take walks anymore. It was a Sunday night in September around 10:30. I was driving home from my cousin's place outside of Pat South, Nebraska. My parents had let me take the car that day, a beat-up silver Camry with 1 working speaker and a crack across the windshield. The road I was on was a narrow 2-lane that cuts between cornfields for miles. No lights, no houses, just stalks on both sides. And the occasional mailbox if you looked hard enough. I had the window cracked and the music low. It was one of those nights where the sky felt too big, clear, no clouds, just stars everywhere. I remember passing a dead raccoon and swerving a little. That's when I saw it. This soft orange glow coming from the field to my right. At first I thought it was a combine or a tractor, maybe somebody working. It was floating not high, maybe 20 feet above the corn. It was perfectly round, smooth, like a sphere glowing from within. Not casting light out, just glowing, orange with a little flicker to it. Like fire without smoke. I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, and turned off the radio. I just sat there staring at it. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just hovered in place like it was waiting for something. My heart was racing. I wasn't scared yet, just locked in. You ever see something and your brain's trying to decide if it's real? That's what it felt like. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera, but the screen just showed black. I tapped to focus, turned up the brightness. Nothing. The glow wasn't showing up at all. I looked back up and the thing was gone. Just gone. No movement. Like it had never been there. The only light left was from my headlights on the road. I sat there another minute, then got back on and drove the rest of the way home, eyes darting to the fields every few seconds. I didn't tell my parents. I wasn't even sure what I'd say. I saw a floating fireball. I just showered and went to bed. The next morning was normal. School was boring. First period was chemistry. I didn't think about the light again until I was leaving after 7. I usually walk to where the buses line up, but that day I took the long way around to avoid a group of kids I didn't feel like talking to. That's when I saw the car. It was parked across the street from the front entrance, black, long, like a Lincoln or one of those older town cars you see in movies. Windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. The engine was running, but no one was getting in or out. I slowed down, something about it felt off. Not the kind of off where you feel unsafe, just watched. I cut across the grass and headed toward the crosswalk. As I got closer, the passenger side window rolled down. The man sitting there wasn't like anyone I'd seen before. He was pale, like paper pale. His hair was short and light-colored, maybe white or silver, cut almost military style. He wore a black suit and a white shirt with no tie. His eyes were covered by black sunglasses, even though it was cloudy out. He looked straight at me and smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. His lips moved, but his eyes didn't. It didn't reach his face at all. He said in this really even voice, like someone reading a script, "It's not healthy to dwell on things you didn't really see." I stopped walking. My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't told anyone about last night, not even my cousin. My phone was in my pocket. I didn't take it out. Then he rolled the window back up and the car pulled away. No squeal, no rush, just quiet and smooth like it was gliding. I watched it turn the corner and disappear behind the row of trees by the senior lot. I went straight home and locked my bedroom door. That night, I kept my phone plugged in next to my bed with the flashlight app open. I didn't sleep much. Tuesday, the car wasn't there Wednesday either. But I started noticing other things. At first, it was small stuff. My phone would freeze for a second, then start working again. My school ID badge, the little RFID thing, stopped scanning, said invalid. Then it started working again the next day. One afternoon that week, my Spotify reset itself like completely. All my playlists gone, my history blank. I didn't even notice until I tried to play something in the car and it said I needed to log back in. I hadn't changed the password or anything. That Friday, I left my algebra binder on my desk during lunch. When I came back, everything inside it had been flipped upside down. Paper still in order, just inverted. I asked my friends if they had been messing with it, but they all looked confused. One of them joked that I must be haunted. I stopped walking alone. I stuck to the bus and kept to crowds. I didn't tell anyone about the man in the car. What would I even say? A guy in a suit told me not to think about a fireball I never told anyone about. The weirdest thing happened the following Monday. We were in the middle of a fire drill, standing out on the soccer field, when I noticed someone standing at the far end of the track, way back by the visitor bleachers. He was facing us, not moving. Same kind of suit, same hair, same posture. I blinked, and he was gone. No one else seemed to notice. I asked Kayla, who was standing next to me, if she saw that guy. She looked where I was pointing and said, "What guy?" That night, I searched online for floating like cornfield, Nebraska, and got a bunch of junk. Videos of drones, weather balloons, fireworks, nothing close. I went back to that stretch of road the next weekend during the day. The corn was still tall. I pulled over to the same shoulder and got out. Walked a few feet in. Nothing there. No tracks, no burn marks, no equipment, just dry ground and rows of stalks. I've never seen the car again. Not in front of school, not around town. But sometimes at night I get this pressure behind my eyes like someone staring at me through the walls. I've started keeping my blinds closed all the time, even during the day. I still drive past that field sometimes, usually on accident. When I do, I try not to look. It was supposed to be just another weekend thing. I'd been helping my friend Tyler run a little side project where we documented weird sightings around upstate New York. We weren't experts or anything. We both worked day jobs in Albany, but we'd drive out to spots people emailed us about, take photos, maybe shoot some B-roll, and upload it to our YouTube channel. It was small time, mostly a hobby. This particular trip was to a patch of woods near Midburg where a guy claimed to see lights land behind his property line. The guy's name was Len. He was in his 60s, I think. Real quiet, real serious. Said he saw 3 white lights drop below the treetops around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. No noise, no wind. Said he hiked out the next day and found a big ring in the moss, perfectly round, maybe 20 feet wide. He'd emailed us photos. Ground did look weird, flat, dry, like something had pressed it down. So we drove up there Saturday afternoon, parked off a dirt shoulder, and hiked in with a couple cameras and a cheap EMF meter. Tyler liked to bring for fun. Took us about 40 minutes to reach the clearing. The ring was still there. Maybe not as sharp as in Len's photos, but you could tell something had disturbed the area. The ground was compacted. The moss around the edge was a different color. We spent a couple hours out there, got drone footage, took soil samples just to say we did. At one point, Tyler said he felt a vibration through his boots, but I didn't feel anything. There was no sound, no wind either. I remember thinking it was unusually still for the middle of the woods. No birds, no bugs, just the occasional creak of trees. We wrapped around dusk and headed back to the car. The drive home was normal. We stopped for burgers and joked about how Len might have just dragged a kiddie pool out there and scared himself. Got back to the apartment a little after 10 o'clock. Tyler and I had been roommates for 3 years. Split level, second floor of a 3-story walk-up on Western Avenue. As soon as we got to our door, we knew something was off. The handle wasn't fully latched. It nudged open when I pushed it. At first, I thought maybe Tyler forgot to lock it, but he swore he always double-checks. We went in slow, thinking maybe someone broke in, but nothing was missing. Our laptops were still on the desk, TV was there, drawers untouched, but every mirror in the apartment had been flipped. The one above the bathroom sink was turned to face the wall. Same with the full-length mirror in my bedroom. Tyler's mirror, the one hanging above his dresser, was lying face down on the carpet. No glass broken, nothing else disturbed. We checked the windows, but they were all still locked from the inside. We didn't call the cops. I don't know why. I guess because technically nothing was stolen and there was no sign of forced entry. Just that one detail, the mirrors. That night, we barely talked. Tyler stayed in the living room and kept the lights on. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured someone standing just outside the edge of my vision. No noise, no movement, just watching. Around 3 a.m., I got up to get water and found Tyler already standing by the window, looking out through the blinds. "There's someone down there," he said without turning. I stepped closer and looked where he was pointing. Across the street, under the D sodium street lamp, stood a man in a black suit. No coat, no umbrella, even though it had started to drizzle. He had pale skin and no hat. His arms hung perfectly straight at his sides. He was staring up at our window, not moving, not pacing, just standing there. I asked if he'd been there long, and Tyler said he'd first noticed him about half an hour ago. We watched for another 10 minutes. He didn't look away. I took a photo on my phone, but when I checked it, the guy wasn't in the frame, just an empty street. Tyler wanted to go down and confront him. I didn't. I said we should just wait. Eventually, sometime after 4, the man walked away, not toward a car, not into a building, just turned and disappeared around the corner. No rush in his step. The next day, we both called out of work. I checked the locks again. Nothing was broken. We talked about what to do next. Report it, ignore it, maybe move. Neither of us really believed we were in danger, but we also couldn't explain what was happening. That afternoon, we tried logging into the channel to review the footage from the woods. The drone clips were there, so were the photos and the soil sample stuff. But the files from Tyler's handheld, the ones where he'd walked through the ring and talked about the soil, were gone. Just gone. Not corrupted, not mislabeled, like they were never recorded. We checked the SD card on my laptop and his same result. No files past a certain timestamp, right around the time we noticed the weird quiet in the clearing. That night, just before bed, I looked out the window again. There was no one on the street, but one of the street lamps, the one directly across from our building, kept flickering on, off, back on, like someone was playing with the power. I watched it for a while, then closed the blinds. Neither of us said anything about it the next morning. Just made coffee and went about our day like normal. But that wasn't the last time I saw the man. I was out on the ridge just after midnight, trying to get some long exposure shots of the Milky Way. I've been into astrophotography for a few years, mostly as a way to get away from everything and just focus on something bigger. This particular night in late October was clear, dry, and cold. The kind of night where the stars really pop. I drove up alone to a spot I'd been scouting for a while, about 20 minutes from my place in northern Vermont. There's a small dirt path leading to a clearing on the ridge, no street lights for miles, and the sky was perfect. I set up my camera on the tripod, fiddled with the settings, 30-second exposures, ISO 600, and started shooting. The ridge faced east, so I was trying to catch the movement of the stars trailing around Polaris. Everything looked normal at first. I was using an old film camera, a Canon AE-1, with some expired Kodak Ektachrome that I found at a thrift store. I like shooting film sometimes because it forces you to slow down and be patient. After about an hour of shooting, I packed up and headed home. When I got back to my little apartment, I started developing the film in the dark room on campus the next morning. I'm a photography major, so the department has a lab that's open pretty much 24/7. The dark room is this cramped basement space with concrete walls and flickering fluorescent lights, plus all the usual chemicals and trays. I like it down there, quiet and oddly comforting. I pulled the first few strips out and hung them to dry. The star trails looked great. Then I noticed something weird on one roll. There were these sharp geometric streaks in the sky, like lines and angles cutting across the star trails above the ridge. They weren't random. They looked deliberate, like patterns someone had drawn in light. The shapes didn't match anything I'd seen before, and they definitely weren't from airplanes or satellites. I looked at the negatives under the light again, blinking a few times, thinking maybe it was a scratch or a processing error. I decided to print a few of those frames and took the sheets into the enlarger. The shapes got even stranger when blown up. Triangles, diamonds, even what looked like a hexagon, all glowing faintly white, almost like light beams, but static and sharp-edged. The rest of the stars were blurred from the exposure, but these shapes stayed sharp and rigid. I showed the prints to my friend Claire, who's also in photography. She said it looked like some kind of light graffiti or maybe a glitch in the film. I agreed it was probably a weird artifact, but it stuck with me. I went back to the ridge the next night, but the sky was cloudy and I didn't get a chance to try again. A few days later, I went to the dark room to get more prints made. The room was empty except for the janitor, this older guy named Mr. Sister older guy named Mr. Soul. Carver. I said hi, and he looked at me with a strange expression like he was holding something back. I didn't think much of it. When I reached into my locker to grab the negatives and prints, I noticed some of the prints were missing. The ones with the geometric streaks. Not just one or two, but the entire set. I asked Mr. Testis to set. I asked Mr. Twell, Carver, if he'd seen them. He hesitated, and then said some men came by here a couple of nights ago after hours. They were wearing suits, black suits, real official looking. I nodded slowly, but he went on. They asked me some strange questions about lights, about long exposures, about capturing things that weren't supposed to be captured. I didn't know what to tell him. I froze for a second. What did they want? They just wanted to know if anyone had been down here taking photos of the sky. Said something about too much light and things better left unseen. I don't think they liked the idea of people poking around. I thanked him and left, but the feeling in my gut didn't go away. I kept checking the lab every day after that, but no new prints showed up. My negatives were still there, untouched. Then one night, while walking back from the campus library, I saw a black sedan parked under a street lamp a block from my apartment. There were two men inside, dressed in dark suits. They didn't get out. As I passed, their headlights briefly flickered, and I swear I caught a glimpse of one of them watching me. I hurried home and locked every door and window. Over the next week, strange things kept happening. My phone battery would drain fast, even though I barely used it. I'd catch flickers of movement outside my window, but when I looked, there was nothing. Once, while driving home late, my headlights briefly dimmed and then returned to normal. I stopped going to the ridge for a while. I didn't tell anyone else, not even Claire. One afternoon, I got an email on my school account. No subject, just a sentence. You've seen too much light lately. It was from an address I didn't recognize. I replied, asking who it was, but got no answer. That night, I thought I saw a shadow standing outside my apartment. When I looked closer, it vanished. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the streetlight. Eventually, I moved all my negatives and prints to a safer place just in case. I never saw those men in black again, but I always felt like someone was watching, waiting. I still don't know what those shapes were on my film or why those men showed up, but I stopped photographing the night sky after that. It didn't feel right anymore. It started with some satellite images I found online. I'm not a pro or anything, just someone who's obsessed with this kind of stuff. UFOs, strange military sites, secret areas marked restricted, that sort of thing. I had been digging through public satellite data for weeks, looking for anything weird. One afternoon, I came across these images of a chunk of land in southern Utah near the border of a military testing zone. It was marked off limits on every map I checked, but in the satellite photos there were these odd indentations in the ground. Perfectly symmetrical geometric shapes carved into the desert floor. They looked deliberate, but nobody had mentioned them anywhere. No news, no forums, nothing. I downloaded the images, cleaned them up as best as I could, and posted a detailed thread on a small online forum for people like me. I included coordinates, zoom-ins, even some overlays showing the shapes clearly. I wanted other people to see what I saw, to get their take on it. That night, after I'd gone to bed, I kept thinking about those images. The shapes looked almost like they'd been carved for some purpose. But why? Who would have access to that land? And why was it completely off limits? I felt like I'd stumbled onto something nobody wanted out in the open. Around midnight, I heard a knock at the door. I live alone in a small apartment on the edge of town, and no one ever knocks this late. At first, I thought it was a prank, or maybe a drunk neighbor, so I ignored it. But then it kept going. Slow, deliberate knocks every few seconds. I looked through the peephole, but didn't see anyone. When I cracked the door open just a bit, there was a man standing there. He was wearing a dark suit, the kind you see in old movies or those stories about government agents. No smile, no greeting, just standing there. "What do you think you saw?" he asked. His voice was quiet but firm, like he expected an answer. I blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me." He didn't respond, just repeated the question, almost like a warning. "What do you think you saw?" I shut the door quickly and locked it. My heart was racing, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe he was someone from the police or some agency, but it didn't feel official. The knocking started again just a few seconds after I closed the door. Every 3 minutes, like clockwork. No words, just that heavy, deliberate sound. I tried calling a friend to come over, but my phone had no signal. Weird, since I usually get decent reception here. I also checked the locks and windows, made sure everything was secure. I stayed awake, sitting near the door, listening. The knocking never, every 3 minutes, like a metronome, sharp against the silence. I tried to look out the peephole again, but the hallway was empty. No one there. It was like the sound was coming from nowhere, but the knocks were definitely real. They echoed faintly down the hall. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? There's a guy knocking on my door, but no one's there. I wasn't sure if I was losing it. Hours passed. I didn't sleep. I kept looking at the door, waiting for the knocks every 3 minutes. It was exhausting and terrifying in a way I can't explain, like being watched, but not in a normal way. At some point, I started to notice the air felt colder near the door, even though my heater was on. There was this quiet, almost buzzing sound, faint and steady, underneath everything else. It wasn't loud, but it was definitely there. When the first rays of sunlight started coming through my window, then the knocking stopped just like that. The hallway was quiet again. I didn't open the door until mid-morning. When I finally did, there was no sign of anyone, no footprints, Later that day, I checked online. The thread I had posted about the satellite images was gone, deleted, completely wiped. No explanation, no warnings, just vanished. I don't know what to make of any of it. The man, the knocking, the images disappearing. It feels like something I wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe someone who didn't want me to see it. I'm still here, and the shapes on the ground are still there too on those satellite maps that somehow escaped deletion. But I don't touch those images anymore. And if I hear knocking at my door again, I'm not opening it. I worked as a night security guard at the Mount Kelsey Observatory for almost 3 years. It's this remote facility about 40 miles outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, up on a ridge surrounded by pine trees. Pretty much the only building for miles, which made it perfect for the kind of telescopes they had. I liked the quiet out there. It was peaceful, a good place to clear my head. My shifts ran from 1 p.m. until 6 a.m. and most nights were uneventful. Just me patrolling the grounds, checking the perimeter, and watching for trespassers or wildlife. The night it happened, it was clear and cold, maybe mid-October. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, barely lighting the dark around the observatory. I was on my usual rounds around midnight when I noticed something unusual. Over the east ridge, not far from the facility, there were 2 bright spheres hovering silently. They weren't flashing or blinking like planes or drones, just steady, intense lights glowing with a kind of pale blue-white color. At first, I thought maybe someone was messing around with spotlights or lanterns, but the spheres didn't move erratically, and they weren't attached to anything I could see. They hovered side by side about 50 feet apart, just above the tree line. I grabbed my flashlight and my binoculars, trying to get a better look. The spheres stayed perfectly still for nearly 5 minutes, just floating there without a sound. I radioed the control room inside the observatory just to report something strange on the east side. They told me to keep an eye on it, but not to approach. I stayed where I was, watching the spheres. Then, slowly, without any noise or shift in position, they started to rise. Maybe 20 feet, then 30, higher and higher, until they disappeared into the sky, moving straight up, faster than any helicopter or drone I'd ever seen. Within seconds, they were gone. I spent the rest of my shift jumping between the cameras on the property and walking the grounds, looking for anything that might explain what I'd just seen. Nothing. No footprints, no vehicles, no signs of anyone being near the ridge. I wrote up my report as usual when I clocked out, trying not to sound crazy. I was just describing 2 bright lights that hovered silently and then vanished. The next morning, when I got to the office, my manager Jeff was waiting for me. He wasn't his usual easygoing self. Instead, he looked tense and kind of guarded. "Morning, Mark," he said, but he was watching the door behind me like he expected someone to come in any second. Before I could ask what was up, 2 men walked in. Both were dressed in black suits, sharp and clean, and they carried themselves with this kind of cold, calm authority. Jeff said, "These gentlemen are with Homeland Security. They're here to talk to you about your report." The agents didn't introduce themselves. No names, no badges with names, just these thick metal badges with numbers. One was 0473, the other 8721. I noticed their eyes the moment they looked at me. It's hard to explain, but their eyes never blinked. Not once. They stared straight ahead, unblinking, like they weren't quite human, or maybe like they didn't want to show anything at all. They asked me the same questions I'd already answered in my report, what I saw when, if I'd noticed anything else unusual around the observatory. I stuck to the facts, the spheres, how they moved, the silence, how I couldn't find any explanation. They didn't write anything down, but just nodded, occasionally exchanging looks between themselves. Jeff hovered nearby but didn't say much. After maybe 20 minutes, the agents left without any explanation or instructions. Before they went out the door, I overheard one of them say something about restricted airspace and non-conventional aerial phenomena, but it was just a whisper. After they left, I tried to shake off the weird feeling that settled over me. The rest of that day felt off. The camera showed static at odd times, like the feed was interrupted for brief moments. And every time I glanced at Jeff, he avoided eye contact, like he knew something I didn't. That night, I worked again, hoping things would feel normal. But as I walked the perimeter, I noticed the same 2 spheres again. They were in the exact same spot, hovering silently. This time, though, I wasn't alone. Behind me, I heard a low hum, almost like electricity. The forest around the observatory felt stir than usual. No wind, no rustling of leaves, no distant wildlife noises. It was like the entire area was holding its breath. I stopped, looking toward the spheres. But when I blinked, one of them seemed to flicker for a split second, almost like it was glitching. The thought made my stomach twist. I'd never seen anything like it. The spheres rose again, this time moving slowly toward the observatory itself. I radioed in to warn the control room, but the static was louder than ever, and my voice came out all crackled. The lights hovered over the main telescope dome for maybe 10 minutes, then vanished without a trace. I couldn't sleep that day or the next. The strange thing was the agents never came back. Jeff said nothing more about them, but after that night, the spheres stopped appearing. Still, I kept feeling watched. At work, the security cameras occasionally caught something moving just out of frame. Too fast to be a person, too vague to be an animal. I started noticing odd little things around the observatory, like faint footprints leading nowhere, or small patches of scorched grass by the equipment sheds. I told Jeff, but he just shrugged, saying it could be animals or people messing around. Still, the unease stuck with me. Weeks passed, and eventually the place felt normal again. But I never forgot those eyes, the agents who didn't blink, the spheres that hovered silently in that strange stillness in the forest. I kept working the night shifts, but every time the wind died down and the sky went completely quiet, I wondered if the spheres might come back. I don't have answers. Just a bunch of moments I can't explain. And I guess that's enough to keep me looking over my shoulder every once in a while. I was never one for spooky stories or conspiracy theories. But what happened to me that October night near Fallon, Nevada, is something I still can't explain. It started out pretty ordinary. Me, a flashlight, and a decommissioned missile silo that's been closed for decades. I'm Jake, by the way, and I'm a bit of an urban explorer. Not the kind who breaks into places for thrills, but someone who's interested in abandoned sites with a little history. The silo was a few miles outside Fallon, tucked away in some scrubland. The place is fenced off, but not exactly sealed up tight. You could see inside the opening where the missile would have been stored, just a big concrete hole leading deep, meaning deep underground. I got there late afternoon, the sun low and orange, the air dry but chilly, with a slight wind picking up. I parked my truck on a dirt road a few hundred yards away and started walking toward the entrance. It was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears, with only the crunch of my boots on the gravel. At first, everything seemed normal. The concrete walls had cracks and faded graffiti. I leaned over the edge, looking down into the dark shaft, which seemed bottomless from up there. I had my phone's flashlight, but it barely reached the first few feet. The air smelled stale and cool, like the place had been sealed for years. I pulled out a coil of rope and rigged a harness just in case, planning to lower myself down a bit to get a better look inside. As I was getting ready, I thought I saw something flicker down in the shadows. A faint glow, almost like a light from a phone or a lantern. I froze for a second, but then figured it was probably a trick of the light or maybe a reflection from the fading sun. Nobody else was supposed to be there, and I didn't want to spook myself. Still, I kept looking down, waiting. Once I was rigged up, I lowered myself about 20 feet down into the shaft. The walls were damp, and the smell was stronger, musty, like old metal and earth. The glow I'd seen earlier wasn't there anymore, but the flashlight caught something else. A series of lights flickering along the far side of the shaft, deeper down. They weren't steady like lanterns, more like pulsating, irregular blue and white mostly. I tried calling out, but my voice echoed weirdly, bouncing off the concrete, and there was no answer. I wasn't expecting one, but it felt strange to be that close to something unknown and get silence back. I climbed back up, my heart rate speeding up for reasons I couldn't explain. The wind had picked up more, and the sky was turning dark. I looked around, but saw no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no vehicles, no lights. When I got back to my truck, I noticed my phone signal was gone. That wasn't unusual in remote spots. But what freaked me out was the radio. It was dead too. No static, no buzz, just silence when I flipped it on. I drove back toward town, the headlights cutting through the darkness. On the two-lane road, the only other light was from the stars and a faint glow on the horizon, probably from Fallon. About halfway home, my truck's dashboard started flickering. The gauges acting weird for a second. The radio suddenly came on. Not music or talk, but a low constant hum, like electrical interference. It was faint and then cut out before I could mess with the knobs. When I finally got home, the weirdness didn't stop. My apartment was the usual cluttered mess. Clothes on the floor, books stacked on the table, nothing out of place. But my mailbox had something new. A single photograph, no envelope, no markings except for a short note on the back and messy handwriting. It said, "We're not buried that deep." I flipped the photo over and stared. It was a grainy black and white shot taken from above. I recognized the spot instantly, the silo seen from the air at night, and in the picture, standing at the edge of the silo's opening, was me. My silhouette, hands resting on the concrete rim, looking down. No idea how someone could have gotten that photo or who sent it. I live alone on the second floor of an apartment building with no windows facing that direction. The place is locked up tight, and no one has keys but me and the landlord who I barely know. After that night, I kept trying to figure out if I'd imagined the lights or if someone had been down in the silo with me. I went back during the day alone and with friends, but saw nothing unusual. No lights, no sounds, no footprints, or evidence anyone else had been there. The area was quiet, too quiet almost. A week later, I was driving by the silo again at dusk when my truck's radio went dead once more. The sky was clear, the sunset fading, and that same hum started low and steady. I turned off the engine and stepped outside. The air felt heavy, and the cicadas that usually fill the evening were silent. Then, from just beyond the tree, I saw the faintest glow again, not moving fast, just hovering low, flickering between blue and white like before. It wasn't a helicopter or plane. It didn't have any wings or sound. I wanted to call out, but the words stuck in my throat. After a few minutes, the light dimmed and vanished into the night like it was never there. I went home and locked every door, triple-checked the windows, and didn't sleep well for days. Since then, the weird things haven't stopped completely. The lights sometimes flicker on my porch at night when no one's there. My phone glitches out. Pictures I didn't take show up in the gallery. Just static and shapes that don't make sense. I don't know who or what that photo on my doorstep or why they would watch me from above the silo. I'm not sure if I want to find out. I was on the dock just after midnight filming. The lake was flat, the kind of still that swallows sound whole. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the air had that damp, heavy feeling you get right before rain starts. I was waiting for those lights to show up again, the weird ones I'd noticed the past few nights. My name's Lisa Moreno, by the way. I live in a small cabin on the outskirts of Ashford, Washington. It's about as close to the wilderness as you can get without completely disappearing from the map. I've always been the kind of person who likes to record stuff, weird stuff, strange things that don't add up. It's a hobby or maybe an obsession. Anyway, those lights first appeared last week. I was out here just messing around with my phone's camera when these faint glimmers started flickering over the water, moving in patterns that didn't match anything natural. No planes, no bats, no fireflies. They looked like small orbs just hovering and then zipping didn't make sense. I figured I'd catch them on video and maybe post it somewhere later, not to prove anything. I'm not that delusional, but just because it was strange. That night, I got some footage. The lights pulsed in a loose circle above the lake, sometimes darting up and down in a way that looked almost deliberate. No noise, just pure silence. The next morning, I showed the clips to my friend Jamie over coffee. He's more into hiking than weird stuff, but he nodded thoughtfully and said, "Maybe it's a drone or something." I thought that was possible, but the movements didn't feel mechanical, and drones don't usually hide in the fog like that. The nights after, I kept coming back, hoping to get better footage, maybe figure out what they were. Then things started feeling off. The first odd thing was the power flicker. It was subtle. One night, while I was editing the video on my laptop, the lights dimmed, then went out completely for about 10 seconds. Just my cabin, though. The whole street was fine. When the power came back, the laptop had frozen. It hadn't been plugged in, so the battery was fine. Just weird. I shrugged it off. Maybe a glitch. Then I noticed my phone acting strange. Battery draining faster than usual. GPS would shut off randomly, or the compass spun like crazy. It happened mostly around the lake. The night before the incident, I decided to sleep early. I was tired and figured I'd skip the usual late-night stakeout. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a sound at the door. I don't usually lock the porch door because it screamed, and no one ever comes around here at night, but this time I had. The sound wasn't a knock, exactly, more like a soft, dragging shuffle on the wooden porch. I got up, heart pounding, and peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing there. He was dressed in black from head to toe. Jacket, pants, boots, no hat, no gloves. His face was in shadow, but I could tell he was looking right at the door. He wasn't holding anything obvious, just standing still like a statue. I didn't open the door. I just whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. I was about to call 911 when I noticed something on the porch floor. The man had dropped something. A photo. I cracked the door open just enough to reach down and pick it up. It was faded, yellowed at the edges like it had been in a wallet for years. I looked at it, then looked back up. The man was gone. No footsteps in the dirt, no sign he'd walked away. The photo was of me. Not recent, though. It was a picture of me as a kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I'm standing in a park, smiling, wearing that blue jacket my mom bought me that winter. I turned the photo over. Nothing written on the back. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I showed the photo to Jamie. He looked at it closely. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I told him what happened. He frowned. That's unsettling. We both agreed not to tell anyone else. I was already feeling a little crazy. For the next few days, I kept watching for the man, but he never came back. I kept noticing strange things, though. My phone would light up with calls from unknown numbers. Never answered, never leaving a message. Lights on the lake still flickered, but now I felt like I was being watched, even when I was inside the cabin. One evening, I heard a soft tapping on the window, but when I looked, nothing was there. I started carrying a flashlight and pepper spray whenever I went outside, just in case. I don't know if the man was connected to the lights or the weird glitches. I don't know why he had that photo or what he wanted to tell me. All I know is after that night, I started paying attention to things I hadn't before. The way the fog rolls in too quickly, the way the power sometimes blinks in half a house, the quiet moments when the world feels paused, like it's holding its breath. Sometimes when I look out over the lake at night, I think I see shapes moving just beyond the trees. And the photo, it's still on my desk right next to my camera. I haven't shown it to anyone else. Not yet. I worked the night shift at a gas station just outside of Salem, Oregon. Nothing fancy. Just a little place on the highway where drivers stop for coffee, snacks, or to fill up before heading into the woods or on long stretches of road. My name's Tyler, by the way. I'm not someone who buys into the weird stuff, or at least I didn't before that night. It was a Tuesday sometime in early October. The weather had been gloomy all day, low-grade clouds, light drizzle now and then, but the night itself had settled into something colder. The kind of chill that sneaks into your jacket and makes you wish you'd grabbed a hoodie. The kind of night where the wind hums through the trees just right, and everything feels a little empty. I was about 3 hours into my shift, sitting behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when the bell on the door jingled. 2 men walked in together, almost perfectly identical. Same height, same build, same dark hair, slicked back, wearing black suits that looked like they'd come from some old-fashioned tailor. They moved slowly and deliberately like they were in no hurry, but knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't glance around the store much, no eye contact with me, just stood in front of the counter like statues. "I'll take a pack of Marlboro," the first one said, his voice low and flat. "2 coffees, black," said the other. I rang it up and told them the total. They pulled out 2 big bills, $100 Hutters, and placed them on the counter. I took the money, gave them change, and they didn't say a word beyond that. No thanks, no small talk, just stared straight ahead. That's when the first strange thing hit me. A cold smell filled the air around them like burnt ozone mixed with something metallic, not quite like smoke, more like the scent you get right before a thunderstorm, but stronger and off. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't unpleasant, just unnatural. It hung around them and seeped into the store, and I swear it lingered long after they left. After grabbing their cigarettes and coffee, they turned to leave. Just before walking out the door, the first man leaned slightly toward me and said, "The sky is safer when it's empty." His voice was quieter this time, almost a whisper but clear. I blinked. "What?" I asked, confused. He didn't answer, just nodded once, very slight, and walked out with his companion. I stood there, frozen for a moment, watching the door swing shut behind them. The cold smell stayed, drifting through the store, even though the heater was running full blast. I figured it was some kind of joke or weird local thing. Maybe they were just eccentrics or part of some cult. I shrugged it off and went back to cleaning the counter, but the smell wouldn't leave. It was like it soaked into the air itself by turning the store from warm and familiar into something sharp and tense. For the next few nights, I kept thinking about those 2 men. I tried to get back to normal, but then strange little things started happening. On the second night after they came, I noticed that the sky was unusually clear, considering the weather reports had said rain all week. No clouds, no stars, just pitch black, like someone had switched off all the lights above. The street lamps outside flickered weirdly, casting long shadows that didn't quite match the shapes of the trees or the gas pumps. Once I glanced out the window and thought I saw a dark shape slit between the pines on the edge of the parking lot, but when I blinked and looked again, it was gone. A few nights later, I caught the gas station's security camera acting up. On the live feed, the parking lot looked normal, except for one detail. The 2 black cars that usually sat empty in the far corner weren't there. That was odd, but not impossible. What got me was when the cameras cut to static for exactly 33 seconds before coming back on. The cars reappeared like nothing happened. I mentioned it to the manager, who just told me to reset the system and forget about it. The nights blurred together after that. I started hearing soft sounds outside, low humming like a machine idling far away. I'd step outside to look but couldn't find the source. Nothing moved. No headlights. No people. One night I caught a glimpse of something strange just above the treetops. A pale light, round and faint, moving slowly across the sky. Not like a plane or helicopter, too smooth, almost gliding. It disappeared behind the clouds after a minute, leaving the sky darker than before. I told some co-workers, but they laughed it off as fog or airplane lights. But the thing is, the night was clear. No fog at all. A week after those men came through, I was closing up when the bell jingled again. My heart jumped, but it was just a woman stopping by to grab a soda before heading home. Still, the whole store felt different after that, like it was waiting for something. Then came the weirdest night of all. It was close to 4 a.m., cold with a strong wind that rattled the building's siding. I was almost done with my shift, wiping down the counters and thinking about getting home. Suddenly, the door jingled again. I looked up and saw the two men. Same black suits, same slick hair, same blank faces. They walked straight to the counter without a word. The cold smell was back, thick and heavy. This time, the first man spoke right away. "The sky is safer when it's empty," he said again, quieter, almost like a warning. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my throat was dry, and the words got stuck. I just nodded, feeling like I was caught in a dream I couldn't wake up from. They handed me a thick envelope, plain, no markings. I looked at it, then back at them. The second man said, "Keep it safe." Then they turned and left without another word. I stared at the door after they were gone. The cold smell lingered for a long time. I didn't open the envelope right away. When I finally did, it was just a few photos. Blurry shots of the night sky, strange lights, and long shadows cast over the trees near the gas station. I still don't understand what it all meant. Since then, I keep an eye on the sky during my shifts, waiting for something else to happen. I don't expect those men to come back, but sometimes when the wind picks up just right and the night goes quiet, I swear I feel like someone or something is watching from the treetops. I still work nights at that gas station, and I still get that cold smell now and then, usually right before the sky seems to go a little darker than it should. The sky might be safer when it's empty, but it sure doesn't feel safe to me. It started just after midnight. I'd been driving home from a late shift at the hospital, cruising through the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Iowa. The road was mostly empty, the trees lining the highway barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. It was a cool, crisp autumn night, a little fog rolling in, making the edges of the road look soft and hazy. I remember that drive like it was normal, nothing unusual about it at first. I wasn't in a hurry, just wanted to get home. Did maybe catch some sleep before my early morning shift the next day. The sky was mostly clear though, with some clouds drifting low, and the moon was hiding behind them. About halfway through the drive, I noticed something strange up ahead. At first, I thought it was just the fog playing tricks, but the sky started lighting up with this weird swirling glow. Not lightning, not fireworks, more like colored bands of light shifting and twisting. Greens and blues mostly, but they pulsed and flickered like they had their own rhythm. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before, and I'm out in the country enough to catch the northern lights or storms. This was different. It was quieter too, no thunder, no crackling. I slowed down, pulled over onto the shoulder, and stepped out of my car. The cold air hit me, fog curling around my boots. I looked up and the whole sky above me was dancing with that strange light. It felt almost hypnotic, like the air was thick with electricity, but I could barely hear anything except the faint rustling of the trees. I took out my phone to try and record it, but the screen was flickering and the camera wouldn't focus right. After a few seconds, the light started to fade, melting away like smoke, and the sky went dark again. Just the regular stars, a few of them faint through the fog. I shrugged it off, got back in my car, and kept driving. I was thinking about calling my brother to tell him, but I didn't want to sound crazy. He'd probably say it was some drone show or airplane lights. When I pulled into my driveway about 20 minutes later, I parked and noticed something off right away. My windshield had something scratched into it right across the driver's side. At first, I thought it was just a smear or dirt caught in the glass. But then I wiped it with my sleeve and saw the words clearly etched there. "Look up, Les." I rubbed my eyes, checked the windshield again. The message was definitely there, fresh, like someone had used a key or something sharp to carve it in just minutes ago. That's when I realized the car wasn't alone. Parked down the street, maybe 50 yards away, was a black sedan. Nothing unusual about it at first glance. No markings, no headlights on, but the engine was running, humming softly in the quiet night. I stood on my porch staring at it for a while, trying to figure out if it was someone playing a prank or if maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But the car stayed there, motionless, engine idling like it was waiting. I didn't want to go down and check it out, so I went inside and locked the door behind me. The next morning, I told a few neighbors about the weird light and the message on my windshield. No one else had seen anything and nobody knew anything about the black car. The police said they'd keep an eye out but didn't seem too concerned. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. I'd catch glimpses of that black car parked down the street again, always with the engine running, but never with anyone inside. Sometimes it would be gone when I looked away for a moment, then reappear a block or two down the road. I started noticing odd sounds at night, low humming, like a transformer buzzing, but there was no equipment nearby. It was always faint and always seemed to be coming from the direction of the woods behind my house. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a bright light flooding my bedroom window. It wasn't the usual street lamp or passing headlights. This light was steady, pure white, and it made the whole room glow like midday. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked outside, but the street was empty. The black car was gone too. I got dressed and went outside to check. The fog was thicker now, hanging low around the trees, and the street was eerily silent. I walked down to where the black car had been, but there was no sign of it anywhere. The next morning I found another message, this time scratched into the bark of the old maple tree in my front yard. Just 2 words, "Stop watching." I didn't tell anyone about the tree. I figured it was some kid messing around, but the handwriting looked almost the same as the windshield message. Jagged, but deliberate. That afternoon I drove around the neighborhood to see if anyone else had seen something. A few neighbors said they'd noticed strange lights in the sky lately, but didn't know what to make of them. One guy said his dog had been acting weird, barking at nothing for hours. After that, I started feeling watched. Not like someone was hiding behind bushes or spying with binoculars. More like a presence I couldn't see just out of the corner of my eye. I kept catching shadows in the street lamps that weren't mine. And sometimes when I looked out my kitchen window late at night, there'd be a faint glow behind the tree line. I stopped going outside after dark. One night, I thought I heard footsteps crunching in the leaves outside my back door. I peeked through the blinds and saw nothing but the empty yard. The wind had picked up and the branches scratched against the window. I tried to call a friend but got no answer. The next day, I found my phone's battery dead, even though I'd charged it fully the night before. The signal was weak, like I was in a dead zone, even though my house usually had full bars. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more disconnected everything felt. Time slipped weirdly, like some hours passed, faster than others. Sometimes I'd glance at the clock and swear it had jumped ahead by 10 or 15 minutes. I thought about calling the police again, but didn't want to sound paranoid. A few nights later, I was sitting on my porch smoking a cigarette when the black car rolled slowly down the street. Headlights off, engine quiet. It stopped in front of my house and just sat there for a long minute. No one got out. I stared back, heart thumping, and the car finally pulled away, disappearing into the fog. After that, the messages stopped and the lights faded from the sky. The black car didn't show up again. I went back to normal routines. But sometimes when I'm driving home late or sitting alone outside, I feel that same quiet watching feeling creep back in. It's subtle, like a soft pressure on the back of my neck. I've checked my windshield and the tree. The scratches have all but faded. I don't know who or what left those messages, or why that car kept showing up. I don't know what the lights were, or what it meant when they said, "Look up, Les." But something was there, something I still don't fully understand. I was out by myself on the edge of Devil's Ridge, a little spot I'd found a couple of years ago while hiking near Flagstaff, Arizona. I'd gone there to take pictures of the stars. The sky's so clear out there, away from all the city lights. It was late September, and the air had that dry, crisp feeling. I remember it being colder than I expected once the sun dipped below the horizon. I had my camera gear with me, a tripod, couple of lenses, and my phone. I set everything up about an hour after sunset, just in time for the Milky Way to start showing. The place was silent except for the occasional whistle of wind through the scrub and pine needles. I was focusing on capturing the stars, adjusting the aperture, checking my exposure, all that stuff. The sky was stunning, dark and full of stars, just as I'd hoped. Then I noticed something out of the corner of my eye on the ridge across the little valley. There was a figure standing there completely still, like a statue. It was on a narrow outcrop of rock, silhouetted against the stars, and it was dressed all in black. I couldn't see any features, just a shape that didn't move or blink. I figured it had to be someone else out there, maybe a late-night hiker or photographer like me, but I hadn't heard any voices or footsteps and the spot was pretty remote. I called out softly, "Hey, you okay over there?" The figure didn't move or respond. I tried again, a little louder, still nothing. Then, just like that, it vanished. Not walked away or hidden behind a tree, but just gone, like someone switched it off. I blinked and looked twice, but there was nothing there. I felt a little uneasy, but also curious. I was alone and pretty far from anything, so I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Maybe the darkness, the way the light hit the ridge, or my imagination. I went back to my camera and tried to refocus on the stars, but my hands were shaking a bit. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. It was just a string of random digits. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick it up. The voice on the other end was distorted, low and cold. It said one thing: "We're watching." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for what felt like forever. My heart was pounding, and the cold air suddenly felt even colder. I wasn't sure if I should pack up and leave or stay and figure out what the hell was going on. I told myself it was some prank or glitch, but that voice didn't sound like a joke. I decided to drive back home, taking the long way through some winding desert roads. The radio crackled with static, and the night felt alive with shadows I couldn't place. On more than one occasion, I glanced in the rear-view mirror and caught glimpses of headlights behind me, even though no one was there when I looked directly. By the time I got home, I felt exhausted and jittery. I checked my phone again. No missed calls, no texts. The battery was fine, no weird apps running, nothing unusual. The next day, I went back to the ridge with a couple of friends. We looked around for footprints, anything unusual, but found nothing. No sign anyone else had been there. The rocks and dirt were undisturbed. Still that night, when I looked out my bedroom window, I caught a shadow slipping between the trees across the street. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, or a stray animal. But when I looked again, there was nothing. I've kept going back to Devil's Ridge, but I haven't seen that figure again. Sometimes when I'm out there, I feel like I'm being watched. A quiet pressure like eyes just out of view. And every so often, my phone will light up with calls from numbers I don't recognize. But when I answer, there's only silence. I don't know what it means or who that figure was. All I know is out there in the dark under the stars, something was paying attention. I work as a security guard for a private contractor that handles surveillance around a military base up in rural Nevada. The base is well known locally as one of those places people whisper about, but never really talk about openly. Classified, they say, off limits to civilians. I won't say which base, but it's the one just outside the small town of Hawthorne. My shift was the overnight one from midnight until 8 a.m. I'm not a fancy guard or anything, just someone who watches screens and makes sure no one sneaks in where they shouldn't. The job's mostly boring, except for when it isn't. About 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in the SEAL security room. The lights dimmed and the glow of the monitors lighting up the small space. It was around 3 a.m., and the night was quiet except for the usual hum of machines and the faint wind outside. I was scrolling through the camera feeds like usual, checking the perimeter cameras around the base. One camera caught my attention. It's pointed at a stretch of road about half a mile from the main gates, a spot where people sometimes try to sneak around, but mostly it's empty at night. At exactly 3:02 a.m., a black car, no headlights on, pulled up and stopped for a few seconds. The car looked older, maybe late 90s or early 2000s, a sedan, but nondescript. Two men got out. That's when things got weird. The footage shows them stepping out silently, but their movements weren't normal. It wasn't just a slow walk or anything like that. They seemed too smooth, like they were gliding a few inches above the ground. I blinked a couple of times, thinking maybe the camera was glitching. They stood side by side, scanning the horizon, almost as if they were searching for something or someone. The way they looked out was calm, but there was this unnerving stillness. No blinking, no head turns that you'd expect when two people look around. They just stood rigid for about 2 minutes. The strangest part was the shadows. They didn't cast any. The streetlights should have been behind them, but their shapes were clear without any shadows on the pavement or nearby rocks. I leaned closer to the screen, thinking maybe I'd missed something. But then I heard the walkie-talkie crackle in the room. One of the other guards called in asking if I was seeing the same thing. I told him about the car and the men. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the two men stepped back toward the car. The footage shows their feet lift off the ground and they glide back like before. The car started moving forward without headlights, then disappeared into the darkness. I tried to rewind and slow down the video, but just then the feed cut out. All the monitors blinked off for a second and came back on with normal daytime footage from earlier that day. The entire 3 a.m. recording was gone. I reported it to my supervisor, who told me not to worry and to focus on the routine patrols. But I knew something wasn't right. I asked around, but the other guards either didn't see it or maybe they saw it and didn't want to say anything. Over the next few nights, I stayed near that camera's feed, hoping to catch whatever that was again. Nothing. No black car, no gliding men. The area was completely silent, except for the usual wind and the distant hum of the bass. What creeped me out the most wasn't just the footage or the missing recording. A few days after the incident, I was driving home on that same stretch of road when I saw a car parked on the side. No lights on, just sitting there. I slowed down, thinking maybe someone was in trouble, but there was no one inside when I got closer. The next day, a couple of locals told me about strange lights they saw near the base, some weird noises in the hills, things moving in ways they couldn't explain. I'm not one for ghost stories, but these people looked serious. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if it was some kind of military test or something else entirely, but the way those men moved, the missing shadows, the footage that disappeared, it wasn't normal. I still work there. Keep watching those cameras. The 3 a.m. feed is under extra lock now. And sometimes when the night is quiet and the wind picks up just right, I swear I can feel eyes watching from the dark hills outside the base. I was hiking alone up in the Cascades somewhere between Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass. It was late October, the kind of early fall day when the sun sets early and the air feels sharp but not quite cold yet. The sky was overcast and there was that thick, damp smell in the forest from all the rain they'd had earlier that week. I was just trying to get away from everything, work, people, noise. My name's Claire, by the way. I work in graphic design in Seattle, and sometimes the city just grates on me until I need to escape somewhere quiet. I started the hike around noon, aiming to get maybe 5 or 6 miles in before turning back. The trail was mostly empty, just the occasional runner or dog walker. I liked it that way. I wasn't really expecting anything unusual. About 3 a.m. in, I noticed something odd just off the path near a clump of ferns. It was a black briefcase sitting upright on the dirt, as if someone had set it down carefully. It didn't have any markings or logos, just a plain matte black surface that looked scratched up in places like it'd been dragged or bumped around. I walked over curious, but there was no one else around. The briefcase was locked tight. No combination, no keyhole, at least none that I could find. It looked almost like one of those hard shell cases you'd see someone use for camera gear or instruments, but it was definitely locked. I jiggled the handle, shook it a little, but it didn't budge. I thought maybe someone dropped it and would come back looking for it. So I left it where it was and kept walking. The rest of the hike was normal, at least at first. But then I started noticing things. I don't know how to explain it. The forest felt heavier, like the air itself was thicker, and the sounds around me were muted. The usual chirping of birds or rustling of leaves seemed distant, like someone turned the volume down on the world. I thought maybe it was just me or my mind playing tricks. As I neared the turnaround point, I looked back and the briefcase was gone. I swear I saw it right there when I passed the spot. I stopped and looked around, but there was no sign of it. No footprints, no crushed ferns, nothing. It was just gone. I thought I must be tired or stressed, so I shrugged it off and started heading back. The next few days were weird too. I kept feeling like someone was watching me, but whenever I looked, there was no one. My phone battery would drain faster than normal. I'd get static on calls or the screen would flicker for a second. Little things, but enough to make me nervous. One afternoon, a few days after the hike, I decided to go back to the trailhead just to clear my head. I parked my car and was walking down the path when I noticed a man standing near the edge of the parking lot. He was wearing a black suit, plain and clean, and a black tie. His hair was short, dark, and neatly combed. But what really caught me was his eyes. They were hollow, not the kind of tired eyes you see at the end of a long day, but like empty sockets, like there was nothing behind them. He didn't move or say anything, just watched as I started down the trail. I stopped and looked back at him, and for a moment, I thought maybe he was going to speak. But then he just turned and walked away, his footsteps quiet on the gravel. I don't know if I imagined the whole thing, but it felt like that briefcase and the man were connected somehow. The next time I went hiking, I looked carefully around that spot where the briefcase had been, but there was no sign of it or any disturbance. I didn't see the man again, at least not in person. But sometimes when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of someone standing just beyond the edge of my vision. Someone in a black suit with those same empty eyes. I keep thinking about the briefcase. What was inside? Why was it there? And why did it disappear? I don't have any answers. Just this strange feeling that something was watching, waiting, or maybe trying to send a message in a way I can't understand. I wasn't supposed to be out there that night. Honestly, I only went because the story was too weird to ignore. A crop circle popping up overnight on a farm just outside my hometown, Melrose, Nebraska. I cover local news for the Melrose Gazette, mostly stuff like county fairs and city council meetings. But when I heard about the circle, it felt different, like something pulled at me to check it out. I got there just after dusk. The sky heavy with mist rolling in from the Platte River. The farm's dirt road was slick from a recent rain, and the cornfields stretched like shadows on both sides. Tall stalks brushing the low clouds. The air smelled damp, a mix of earth and something I can't quite describe. Metallic, maybe. I parked my car near the edge of the field and grabbed my camera and notepad. I'd called my editor earlier. She gave me the go-ahead to do a quick piece. The farmer, a guy named Hank, was still a little spooked, but let me wander through the crops as long as I stayed on the path. I walked carefully. The circle was about 50 feet wide. Perfect rings and lines flattened into the corn. Every stalk bent but not broken. It looked almost too perfect, like someone used a stencil. But the ground was still wet, and the crops hadn't started to wilt or dry. Someone had made this recently, or maybe I don't know. The first odd thing was the silence. It was one of those moments where the world just stops making noise. No insects, no rustling leaves, nothing except the soft squish of my boots in mud. Even the farm dogs down the road were quiet. That felt unnatural. I took photos and jotted down notes, my breath misting in the cool air. I noticed my phone battery dropping fast, like from 70% to 20 in less than 10 minutes. I hadn't been using it that much. Maybe the damp was messing with it. After a while, I stepped back and looked at the circle from a distance. The mist was thick now, swirling in the low light, and the corn seemed to close in, the tall stalks almost blocking my view beyond the field's edge. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, heart jumping, but no one was there, just the cornfield moving gently in the breeze. I told myself maybe an animal or just my imagination. Then I heard voices, low, calm, male voices speaking just out of earshot. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a question repeated twice. I started walking toward the sound, trying to find whoever was there. Then two men appeared through the fog. Both were wearing black suits, standard business style, no ties, shoes polished even in the mud. They didn't look like they belonged in a cornfield at night. One of them looked at me and said without introduction, "Are you prepared for what's beneath the soil?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" They didn't answer. The second man just stared, eyes dark, unreadable. I took a step back, my skin prickling. The mist seemed to thicken between us. Before I could say anything else, they turned and walked deeper into the field, fading into the fog like ghosts. I called out to them, but the mist swallowed my voice. I stood there for a long time trying to make sense of it all. The voices, the question, the sudden appearance of those two men. When dawn broke, I came back with the farmer and some deputies. The crop circle was gone. Not trampled or disturbed, just gone. The corn was standing tall again as if nothing had happened. No footprints, no signs of machinery, nothing. I still have the photos I took the night before. The mist in them looks thicker than I remember, almost like a curtain. I don't talk about what happened much. The circle, the men, that question. Sometimes I wonder if it was just some strange dream or if I really was out there with something I can't explain. But every now and then, when the mist rolls in thick over Melrose, I remember the question echoing in my mind and I realize I still don't know the answer. The first time I noticed the black sedan parked across the street from my house, I thought maybe it was just someone visiting a neighbor. It was late, around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the street was quiet except for the occasional passing car. The sedan was a newer model, totally blacked out windows, clean, unmarked, no plates, parked perfectly parallel to the curb like it had been there all day. I stepped out onto my porch just to get a look at it, but the driver didn't move, just sat there, engine off. I figured maybe someone was waiting for a friend or something, didn't think much of it. Then the next night, same car, same spot. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, so I asked my neighbor Tim if he'd seen anything strange. He said he hadn't noticed a thing. But over the next week, the car showed up every night around the same time. Never moved, never made a sound. I started feeling a little uneasy, but didn't want to jump to conclusions. I kept an eye on it from my living room window. The tinted windows made it impossible to see the driver, but I was sure someone was in there. That was when the photos started. It happened about 2 weeks before the car showed up. I'd been driving home late on State Route 42, that stretch of highway that cuts through the edge of town, mostly empty at night. I pulled over at one of the roadside overlooks just to stretch my legs and get some fresh air. The sky was clear, stars bright, a little chilly. I pulled out my phone, started scrolling through some old photos, then glanced up and saw it. There was something hovering maybe 50 feet above the highway, right over the center line. It looked like a dark shape, smooth and kind of rounded, but no wings or anything you'd expect on a helicopter or plane. No blinking lights, no noise, just floating there, perfectly still. I fumbled with my phone and snapped a few pictures. It was hard to focus. The thing seemed to absorb the light around it, making it hard to tell where it ended and the sky began. I remember the streetlights below flickered like the power was struggling. It was the strangest thing. After a few minutes, it slowly drifted to the right, out over the trees, then vanished as quietly as it had appeared. I got back in my car and drove home without thinking too much, though the whole time I felt like I was being watched. A couple of days later, the black sedan started showing up outside my house. That's when the quiet started to get heavy. The way the car just sat there, windows blacked out, no headlights or brake lights, but definitely watching. I told myself, maybe it was just coincidence. Someone staking out the neighborhood for some reason. But why me? I didn't have any enemies. I didn't owe anyone money. I hadn't had a fight or anything. The only thing different was the photos. I thought about deleting them, but something made me keep them. I didn't show anyone. Not my friends, not my family. Just saved them on my phone. One night, about a week after the car appeared, I stepped outside to smoke, and the sedan was there, just like always. I noticed a shadow moving behind the tinted windows. Just a slight shift, the driver turning his head slowly watching me. I swallowed hard and went back inside, locked the door, checked the windows. I kept thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, one evening around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door, not the usual kind. Soft, deliberate, like someone trying to avoid making noise, but still getting my attention. I opened it a crack and saw a man standing there. Black suit, perfectly pressed, no tie. He looked ordinary enough, but there was something about the way he held himself. Calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. He didn't smile, didn't say hello, just handed me a small, plain business card. No name, no company, nothing but a single line printed across the center in black ink. Forget the pictures. His voice was barely above a whisper. Before I could say anything, he turned and walked away. The street was empty. No car waiting, no one else in sight. I looked down at the card. The paper was thick, almost unnaturally smooth. I wanted to throw it away, but instead I stuck it in my pocket. After that night, the black sedan stopped showing up, but the photos stayed on my phone, and sometimes when it's dark and quiet, I catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see those blacked-out windows staring back. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. I don't know if I should delete the pictures or keep them. All I know is that sometimes when I look at those photos, I see more than just a shape hovering over the highway. There's something watching back, and I don't think I'm supposed to see it. I was chasing a storm out in the Oklahoma plains late April. The kind of that either breaks or makes you if you're into this sort of thing. I've been doing it for years, mostly freelance now, picking up gigs for local news and weather sites. Nothing fancy, just me, my truck, and a camera. That afternoon, the sky was this insane mix of dark, grey and green. The kind that makes you feel like the air itself is charged. I was following a funnel, cloud northwest of Tulsa, just off some empty back roads. The wind was howling, dust whipping around, and the storm was building fast. I pulled over on a gravel shoulder, set up my camera on the tripod, and started filming the funnel from a safe distance. The cloud was rotating steady, thick at the base, tearing across the flat land. I was focused on the usual stuff, the swirling dust, lightning off in the distance, the way the cloud shifted and twisted. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught something that didn't fit. There was a faint shimmer, like a reflection or maybe a heat haze just above the funnel's tip. I adjusted the zoom and got a better look. At first, I thought it was debris caught in the updraft, but this was too smooth, too precise. It looked like some kind of metallic object floating or hovering, catching the fading sunlight in a way that made it gleam. The shape was vague, sort of oval, maybe the size of a small car, but it moved slowly, deliberately, not spinning, not tumbling, just holding position like it was watching the storm or riding its edge. I kept filming, heart pounding, trying to stay steady. The wind was getting worse and I could feel rain starting to spit. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes before the funnel started shifting direction and the metallic shape faded away behind it, swallowed by the clouds. I packed up fast and started heading back towards town, adrenaline buzzing but trying to keep my head clear. That night I uploaded the footage to my YouTube channel and sent it to a couple of storm-chasing forums. The next morning the video had gone viral, tens of thousands of views, people speculating non-stop. Some thought it was a drone, others said it was a reflection or a trick of the light. Me, I wasn't sure what to think. Then the weird stuff started. Around noon the day after the video went viral, I got a call on my cell from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end said they were an insurance agent asking if I'd had any recent wind damage to the brain. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was some prank or a weird joke, but the voice was serious, almost clinical, like they were reading from a script. "We're just checking for any cognitive impairments caused by severe wind exposure. They said it's routine for anyone involved in high-risk weather events." I told them no, I was fine, and asked who they were with. The line went silent for a moment, then the caller hung up. I tried calling the number back right away. It was disconnected. That was when the footage vanished. My YouTube channel was still there, but the video itself was gone. No explanation, no takedown notice, nothing. I tried uploading it again from my backup copy, but it wouldn't process. I asked around in the forums, but anyone who had saved or shared it seemed to lose their copies too. Files corrupted or mysteriously deleted. After that, I started noticing other things. My phone would beep randomly with no notifications. Sometimes when I looked up the sky, there'd be strange reflections or quick flashes in the clouds. Nothing solid, just flickers, like something was trying to stay hidden, but couldn't help revealing itself. One night, driving home from a diner, my radio cut out completely for a full 5 minutes. No static, no sound at all, just dead silence. Even though the engine and everything else were fine. I checked my car the next day. No issues. I kept waiting for someone official to contact me, maybe asking for the footage or an interview. Nothing. It's been a couple of months now. I still chase storms, but I stay away from funnels and anything that gets too close. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, the metallic shape, the pole, the missing video. The memory of that shimmer above the funnel cloud that's burned in there. I don't know what it was. I just know it wasn't part of any storm I'd ever seen before. I was hiking alone one Saturday afternoon in the Bitterroot National Forest out in Montana. It was early October, just when the leaves were starting to turn, and the air had that crisp edge to it. Not cold, but cool enough that you knew winter wasn't far off. I had picked a less popular trail, one I hadn't been on before, hoping for some quiet and maybe some good photos of the changing trees. The day was mostly normal. The usual sounds of birds, rustling leaves, distant streams. But about halfway through the hike, as I crossed a small ridge and started down into a hollow, everything changed. The forest just went silent. I don't mean it was quiet in the normal sense. It was more like someone hit a mute button. No birds, no wind in the trees, no rustle of animals moving through the brush. Even the distant sound of a stream seemed gone. I stopped walking, stood still, and looked around. The air was still, almost too still. It felt unnatural. I shrugged it off, figuring it was some weird pocket where the wind didn't reach, or maybe a rare moment with no birds. But the silence pressed in on me, and the forest felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Then I noticed something up ahead in a clearing. At first I thought it was a black tarp or some kind of equipment. As I got closer, I realized it was a helicopter. A black one hovering maybe 20 feet above the ground, totally still except for the blade slowly spinning. It didn't look like any rescue or ranger chopper I had seen. It was matte black, no markings, and had this low humming sound that was almost mechanical, like a different kind of engine. Beneath it were 3 figures standing in a tight line. They weren't moving. I mean, not even the smallest twitch. They were dressed in black, like some kind of uniform, but there was no detail on them. No faces visible, just black shapes, motionless, almost like statues. I froze for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My brain was telling me to keep walking, maybe turn back, but my feet didn't move. I raised my camera and took a few pictures, hands shaking slightly. After a minute, the helicopter slowly lifted and disappeared over the treetops with a near-silent glide. The figures stayed behind in the clearing, but a moment later they vanished too. I looked around, but there was no sign of where they went. I felt a weird chill run through me, even though the air was still warm. I left the clearing and made my way back toward the trailhead, my heart pounding a bit more than usual. The next week was normal, or so I thought. Monday morning, I got into my car to drive to work, about a 25-minute commute through some back roads and light traffic. About 10 minutes in, I noticed a black SUV following me. It was a big vehicle, tinted windows, no plates that I could see. At first I thought it was coincidence, maybe the same car as the day before, but it stayed behind me all the way to downtown. I took a few turns to see if it would lose me, but it didn't. When I stopped at a red light, the window on the passenger side rolled down, and a man inside leaned out slightly and said, "Forests don't like company." His voice was low and calm, but there was something about it that unsettled me more than the words themselves. I didn't answer. The light turned green and I pulled away. The SUV kept its distance, but followed for another few miles before disappearing. I couldn't shake that phrase. What did he mean? Was it some kind of warning? I tried to tell myself it was a joke or some random line, but it stuck with me. Over the next few days, I kept an eye out for the SUV, but it never showed again. Still, I felt like I was being watched. My phone battery started dying faster than usual, and sometimes I'd catch flickers of movement in the corners of my eyes, shadows that vanished when I looked directly. I thought maybe I was just stressed or tired, but the memory of that silent clearing and the helicopter stayed with me, and the 3 figures standing so still like they belonged to some other world I wasn't meant to see. I never went back to that part of the forest. I don't know if I ever figure out what was really happening that day, but sometimes, when the wind is low and the trees stand quiet, I still feel like those black shapes are watching from somewhere out there. I started the podcast almost 2 years ago, mostly as a side project. My name is Jamie Taus. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I've always been into weird stories, especially the kind people write off as conspiracy or urban legend. Nothing crazy, just local mysteries, odd disappearances, things that don't quite add up. Last month, I put out an episode about a UFO sighting from the 1970s that's been unsolved and mostly forgotten. The guy who reported it, a trucker named Walt, claimed he saw some strange lights hovering over a stretch of highway near Cherokee, then lost time. The official records are thin, and most locals treat it like a campfire tale. But I found some old audio interviews and pieced it together. The episode got more listens than anything I'd done before. The day after it dropped, I started getting weird voicemails on my podcast number. At first they were just static bursts, the kind you get with a bad connection. Then, after a few days, the static started breaking up. and I could hear something else underneath. A deep, distorted voice repeating the phrase, "Turn back," the signal over and over. No name, no message, just those words. I thought it was a prank at first. I mean, who would do that? But the voicemails kept coming almost daily. Always at night, always that same phrase. Sometimes the static would flare up so loud it rattled my phone. I tried to block the number, but it just kept changing. No caller ID, no trace. I told some friends, and they're part of the spooky podcast hype, or maybe just some troll having fun. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, about a week after the episode went live, I woke up one morning to find all my recording gear gone. Every mic, every recorder, the mixer, headphones, everything I used to make the podcast was just disappeared. I live alone on the edge of town, so I don't have housemates or anyone else with easy access. I checked every window and door. Nothing was broken or forced. It was like someone had a key and knew exactly what to take. What freaked me out more was what I found outside my front door. Sitting there on the welcome mat was a single microphone, one of the old handheld mics I use for interviews. It wasn't just left there casually, it was placed carefully right in the center. When I picked it up, I noticed something carved into the metal body near the base. Just one word: silence. I'm not exactly sure how I didn't lose it at that moment. I mean, it felt like a line had been crossed, but not in any way I was prepared for. I called the police, but they shrugged it off as a burglary with a weird message. They couldn't explain the missing stuff or the mic on the doorstep, and they didn't find any signs of forced entry. After that, the voicemail stopped, but I wasn't any less paranoid. I was watching the shadows in my apartment, double-checking locks, jumping at every noise. I shut down the podcast for a while, deleted the towel episode about Walt, hoping that would stop whatever was happening. But something else started. Sometimes when I tried to record just ambient sounds or anything normal, the playback would have static or low whispers layered underneath. Nothing clear, but always there. I even tried wiping my phone and computer, reinstalling everything, but the interference persisted. The silence in the room felt heavier, like it was watching me. Last night, I heard a knock at the door around midnight. It was soft, deliberate, and I looked through the peephole. No one was there. I opened it anyway and found a small, worn cassette tape sitting on the porch light ledge. No label, no writing. I brought it inside and played it on my old tape player. It was mostly silence, except for a low, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. After a minute, the voice came through clearer than before. That same deep voice, calm but chilling. Turn back the signal. I turned it off, heart pounding. I'm back here now writing this, trying to make sense of it all. The gear is still gone. The voice keeps coming in bursts of static on my phone, and that mic, silence, still sits on my desk cold to the touch. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. It was a little after 7 p.m. when I took off from the municipal strip just outside of Missoula. Weather was good. Weathered. Scattered clouds, no turbulence. I fly a 1974 Piper Cherokee I co-own with a guy named Pete from the Flying Club. Nothing fancy, just a solid little four-seater we keep in a shared hangar. That night I was flying solo, just a loop east toward the Bitter Roots and back. I like to take short runs around dusk, especially in the fall when the air is smoother. I filed the usual VFR flight plan, got my clearance, did all the checks. Nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't testing anything new or pushing any altitude, just a routine flight. About 20 minutes in, somewhere over the foothills near Rock Creek, I saw something off the left wing. It looked like another aircraft at first, something metallic, round, maybe 200 feet away, moving parallel to me, but not overtaking. I thought it might be a drone, except it was too big and way too high for any drone I'd seen. The shape was off, perfectly round, like a coin held up edge on, but no visible propulsion, no lights, no markings, and it was completely silent. I know that sounds like nothing when you're already in a noisy cockpit, but this was different. The way it moved dead smooth made the silence stand out more. It kept pace with me for maybe 15 seconds, then shot upward at an angle and vanished into the clouds. I keyed up the radio and called it in to ATC, just a position report and a note that I'd seen a possible unidentified aircraft. No panic, just the facts. The controller came back after a beat and said they weren't showing any traffic in my vicinity and no primary radar hits either. That's unusual even in a low traffic area. I wrapped the flight like normal, logged my time, filled out the usual form, and filed a quick report just in case. Nothing dramatic, just noted a possible unauthorized aircraft. I figured maybe someone would follow up in a day or two, but no one did. A week went by, then two. No calls, no emails, not even a note in my inbox from the FAA rep. I figured maybe they didn't take it seriously, or maybe they got swamped. I didn't push it. I've been flying over 30 years. I know how stuff can disappear into the system. Then one afternoon, I checked the online flight log and saw my report was gone. Not edited, gone, like it was never submitted. I went to the hangar to pull a paper copy, and that was gone too. The folder we keep for that week was missing from the cabinet. Pete said he hadn't touched it. I called the FAA field office to ask if they had a copy, or if something got flagged, and the guy I talked to acted like I was confused. He said there was no report attached to that flight. Nothing unusual logged. I asked him to double-check, and after a pause, he just said, "You might be misremembering. Are you sure you submitted it?" I dropped it after that. Something about the tone in his voice made it feel like I shouldn't ask again. 3 weeks later, I got to the hangar early on, a Sunday morning. It was quiet, just me. Coffee in one hand, key in the other. As I was unlocking the gate to the tarmac, I saw a car parked on the gravel near the end of the row. Black, long body looked like a rental. 2 men were standing beside it, both in black suits. No hats, no coats, despite the wind. They weren't talking, just standing there facing the hangars like they were waiting for someone. I figured maybe they were insurance reps or feds doing a spot inspection. It happens, especially after incidents. But I hadn't reported anything else, and the club hadn't mentioned a visit. As soon as I got the hangar door halfway open, they started walking over. Not fast, not aggressive, just this steady, synchronized walk like they knew exactly where they were going. Both looked the same age, maybe late 30s, clean-shaven, pale, same build, same short haircut. It felt off somehow, like they were cousins trying to look alike. One of them spoke first. His voice was flat, like someone reading off a teleprompter. "Mr. Wilcox." I nodded. "Yeah. You recently reported a visual anomaly on a flight east of Missoula. We're here to follow up on that." That threw me a little. The report was gone. Nobody had acknowledged it. "Who are you with?" I asked. The second man smiled, wide but not friendly. "You can call us contractors. We handle misfiled data." I didn't like how he said that. Misfiled? Like it had been intentional. The first man stepped closer. "We wanted to ask if you've been feeling unwell since the event. Any dizziness, confusion, auditory hallucinations?" I shook my head. "No, I'm fine." He nodded like he didn't believe me. Sometimes these experiences can cause residual effects. It's not uncommon for pilots to conflate visual artifacts with airborne debris or weather phenomena. I know what I saw. It wasn't a weather balloon. It wasn't debris. They didn't respond right away. The second guy glanced toward the hangar, then looked back at me. "We'd recommend you take a short leave from flying," he said. "Just a few weeks. Let things settle." "I'm not grounded," I said. "No one's filed anything." "Not yet," he replied. The first man looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Still chasing the sky, huh? Chippy." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard that nickname since I was 10. My grandfather used to call me that. I don't even remember why. It wasn't written anywhere. Not on any license. Not on social media. Not in anything official. I didn't say anything. I just stood there while they turned and walked back to the car. The wind picked up a little. The gravel under their shoes didn't crunch. They pulled away without another word. That night, I went back and checked everything I had. Emails, notes, cloud backups. Every trace of the original report was gone. Even the local copy I'd saved on my laptop had been overwritten. Just a blank document with the file name still there. Pete said he saw the same car parked down the road the next evening, just idling near the train. I haven't flown since. I was out walking the dog when I saw it. This was 2 winters ago, early February, cold but not snowing. I remember that, because the sidewalk was dry and I hadn't bothered with boots, just old sneakers and hoodie pulled over my head. It was around 12:45 a.m. I always take Benny out late before bed. He's a shepherd mix, mostly calm, but if he doesn't get that last walk in, he'll pace all night. We live in a quiet neighborhood in Spokane Valley near Pines and 16. Nothing special. Ranch-style houses, older trees, not much traffic after dark. Benny and I were coming back up our street, maybe 5 houses from mine, when he suddenly stopped and stared straight up. At first, I thought he was just watching a bird, or maybe an owl. But when I looked up, I saw it, too. A triangle, not a plane. I've seen enough jets and stuff flying over to know what they look like. This thing was big, blacker than the sky. No lights except for 3 faint white ones at the corners. It moved slower than anything that size should have been able to. No engine noise, no wind disturbance, just gliding like it was weightless. It passed overhead, maybe a couple 100 feet up. I remember how quiet it got. Not just the object, but everything. Like the sound around us just dimmed. I couldn't hear my footsteps or the dogs breathing. It's like someone turned the world's volume knob halfway down. Benny didn't bark. He just sat there and stared until it disappeared behind the trees to the north. I checked my phone to take a photo, but the screen was frozen on the lock screen. Wouldn't swipe. It only started working again about 30 seconds after the thing was gone. I didn't say anything to anyone the next day. I figured it was maybe a military thing or a drone I didn't recognize, or just one of those weird one-off moments you file away and move on from. 2 days later, things started getting weird. It was a Tuesday. I'd been asleep for a couple hours when I woke up. No noise or anything, just that kind of sudden wide-awake feeling you get sometimes for no reason. I got up to check the ED side thermostat, thinking maybe the furnace shut off. And while I was walking past the living room window, I saw headlights across the street. There was a black car idling in front of the Wilkins place. Older model sedan, big body, chrome, trim, lights on but not bright, just idling. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the headlights flashed once. Not high beams, not like someone tapping them. It was this short, slow fade on, then off, like they were signaling something. Then the car drove away. No rush, no tires squealing, just smooth and quiet, turning the corner at the end of the block and vanishing. I waited a while, then went back to bed, chalked it up to a weird dream, or maybe someone turning around. But the next night, same thing. 3:17 a.m. on the dot. I checked the clock. Flash, then gone. It happened again the next night and the next. Always the same car, always the same time, always just one flash of the headlights, never parked in exactly the same spot. Sometimes in front of the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgan's place, but always directly across the street from my house. By the 5th night, I started getting nervous. I tried to film it, set up my phone on a tripod in the window, recording for 20 minutes, starting at 3:10. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, the car wasn't there, just empty street. But I'd seen it. I stood there and watched it. I even waved at it once. I started asking around the neighborhood. No one else had seen the car. Not the Morgans who sleep with their blinds open. Not old Mr. Harrington across the street who said his dog barks if a leaf blows past the driveway. Even my wife didn't believe me. She works nights at the hospital, so she's never around that late. When I told her about it, she just said I needed to stop watching weird documentaries before bed. I stopped. I stopped walking Benny after midnight. Started doing it earlier, just after dinner. I kept checking the window though. Night after night, the car came back. Always at 3:17, always one flash. Always gone by the time I reached the door. I tried calling the non-emergency line once just to report a suspicious vehicle. Gave them the time, the make, and model as best I could, the pattern. They said they'd send a cruiser through the area. I don't know if they ever did. Nothing changed. Then about a week into this, I stayed up late and waited outside on the porch. I kept all the lights off and stood behind the column so I wouldn't be seen from the road. Benny was inside pacing. He didn't like it when I was out of sight lately. At 3:17, the car pulled up again. No headlights this time, just the faint glow of running lights. It stopped directly across the street. Engines stayed on. I couldn't see inside. The windows were too dark. I remember it didn't look dusty or weathered, just clean, like overly clean. No license plate on the front. I stepped out a little, just enough to get a clear look, and the driver's side window rolled down halfway. There was a man inside, pale, thin face, wearing a black suit. No hat, just sitting there staring at me. I didn't move, neither did he. Then, after maybe 10 seconds, he lifted his hand, not a wave, just held it up flat like a stop signal and slowly rolled the window back up. The car pulled away without flashing its lights. That was the last time I saw it. The next few nights, I kept watch. Nothing came, no headlights, no idling, just an empty street. I told myself I was relieved, but in the back of my mind, I kind of missed it. At least when it was showing up, I knew where to look. Now I just keep checking the street at 317 out of habit. And sometimes I swear I hear idling down the block. But when I look, there's nothing there. It happened 2 summers ago during the Palisades. I'd driven out to the middle of nowhere, a place about 30 m east of Lander, Wyoming, County Road 221. Nothing out there but scrub hills and a single busted windmill. I knew the area because I used to do field work out that way. Quiet spot, no light pollution. I'd planned to park the truck off the shoulder, throw a blanket in the bed, and watch the show with a thermos of coffee and a camera. The sky was completely clear. No clouds, no moon, just stars. I was out there by 11, way earlier than peak activity, but I didn't care. I've always liked the solitude, no service out there either, which honestly made it better. The first few hours were uneventful. I dozed off around 12:30, and when I woke up a little after 2 a.m., the sky was lit up. I sat up, pulled the camera out, started clicking long exposures. I had a basic tripod rigged up in the truck bed and was just letting the shutter roll. Then, somewhere past 3, I noticed something weird on the road behind me. At first, I thought it was just the tripod's shadow, but it didn't move when I moved. It was a shape. A person maybe 50 feet back, just standing dead center on the road. No flashlight, no movement, just a silhouette. I stared at it for a while, thinking maybe someone pulled off and walked over. But I didn't hear a car, nothing. No footsteps on gravel, no crunch of tires. And this person, if it was a person, didn't shift or turn or do anything normal. I turned my headlamp on and shined it towards them. The beam hit the road, lit up the shoulder and brush, but didn't catch their face. They didn't flinch or shield their eyes or step back, just stood there. I grabbed my phone and took a picture. No zoom, just one quick shot before the light started fading. As soon as the shutter clicked, they turned around and walked into the dark. No sound, just gone behind. The low slope on the other side of the road. I got out and walked a little closer, thinking maybe they needed help. I called out, no answer. I didn't want to chase someone through the brush in the middle of nowhere. So, after a minute or two, I went back to the truck. I checked the photo. It showed a figure. All right, thin, too tall, maybe wearing black or something close to it. The arms looked too long, and the head was oddly shaped. Not a hat, not hair, almost featureless, like the face was turned away or blurred. I figured it was a trick of the lights, some camera artifact. It creeped me out more than I wanted to admit, but I saved it and locked the phone. The rest of the night was quiet. No more weird figures. I watched the meteors a bit longer, then left just before dawn. I didn't think about it again until the next day. That's when things got strange. I stopped for gas at a Conoco in Riverton on the way back to my place. It was early, maybe 7 a.m. I went inside to use the bathroom. Just a quick stop. The place was empty, just the cashier behind the counter and nobody else. As I was drying my hands, the door opened behind me. A man in a black suit stepped inside, clean cut, maybe mid-40s, pale skin, no tie, top button fastened. His shoes were spotless. He didn't look like someone who belonged there. He stood by the sinks for a second. I remember thinking maybe he was just there to wash up or something, but then he said without looking at me, "You've seen too much light lately." I laughed. I thought it was a weird joke. Then he turned and looked at me straight on, and my stomach dropped. His eyes didn't match. The color was off, like the irises were too pale or the pupils were too big. Not fake, just not right. He held out his hand. "Your phone," he said. I didn't move. He stepped closer. "You took a picture. Give me the device." There was no threat in his voice, just this flat certainty like he already knew I would. And I did. I don't know why. I pulled it out and handed it to him. He looked at the lock screen, tapped the code in. I never told him the code, then turned away and left the bathroom. I followed him out into the store, but he was gone. Gone. No footsteps, no sound, nothing. The cashier was still at the counter, flipping through a flyer. Didn't even look up. I asked if he saw anyone walk out. He said no one came in. I checked the parking lot. No black car, no weird SUV, just me and the truck. I stood there for a good 5 minutes trying to figure out what had just happened. Then I noticed the phone was back in my back pocket. I didn't feel him put it there. Didn't see him come near me. I unlocked it. Everything was wiped. It just said camera roll, texts, downloads, all gone. Factory reset. The only thing left was my contacts synced from the cloud. The photo I took gone, not even in the backup folder. Later that night, I plugged the phone into my laptop just to be sure. I ran recovery software. Nothing. The metadata showed a hard reset had been done at 7:14 a.m., the exact time I was in that gas station bathroom. I haven't talked about this with many people. The ones I did tell just assumed I fell asleep and dreamed part of it. I didn't. That stretch of road, I've never gone back. We were at Deep Creek Lake October off-season. Most of the rentals were already boarded up for winter, and it was too cold for swimming. But I'd always liked the place when it was quiet. I'd gone with my girlfriend Mallory just for a 2-day break. Nothing fancy. We stayed in a little roadside motel a few miles out from the state park entrance. Just the kind with one ice machine and paper-thin walls. That first night, we drove into the park to look at the stars. There's a boat launch area near the north end of the lake, with a decent-sized gravel lot, totally unlit. No other cars when we pulled in, just us and the water. It was around 11 o'clock, cold but not freezing. Mallory brought a blanket and we sat on the hood of the car, sipping coffee from a thermos, just listening to the wind and water. You could barely see anything across the lake. The tree line on the far shore was just a darker shade of black against the sky. We were there maybe 20 minutes before we noticed something weird. At first, I thought it was just fog or mist over the lake, but it was moving too deliberately, not drifting, rising from the water. We both sat up. There was a shape huge, wide across, not floating, not splashing, just lifting straight up, slow and silent. No lights, no rotors, nothing mechanical. Just this massive dark thing coming out of the lake, like it had been resting on the bottom. Mallory asked, "Is that a blimp?" It wasn't. It had no curve to it. It was more angular than that, like a stretched-out wedge with a flat underside. It rose maybe 50 feet up, and then just hovered. We didn't move, didn't even talk. It was so quiet, no hum, no wind, no water dripping. It made no sound at all, which somehow made it worse. Then it started to move. Not toward us, not away, just sideways, gliding low along the surface of the lake, if skimming a few feet above the water. It passed in front of the far tree line and disappeared into the darkness like it had never been there. We didn't say anything for a minute. Then Mallory just said we should go. So, we got off the hood, packed up the thermos, and got in the car. I pulled a quick U-turn and headed for the exit. That's when we saw the note folded in half, tucked under the driver's side wiper. I hadn't seen anyone approach. No footsteps, no lights. It hadn't been there when we arrived. I turned the wipers on to flick it loose. It fluttered to the ground. Mallory picked it up. Just a plain white paper. No envelope. Inside, printed in blocky all caps. It said, "Keep driving next time." No signature, no handwriting, just that. We didn't speak the whole drive back to the motel. The next morning, I woke up early. The bed was too soft, and the heater was loud. I went to the front desk to grab one of those tiny motel coffees. The lobby was empty except for the guy behind the desk and another man sitting in one of the chairs by the fake fireplace. He was in a black suit, dark tie, pale hands, wearing sunglasses even though it was barely light out. He was reading a newspaper, holding it upside down, not like he didn't notice, like he didn't care. I stood there pretending to check the map rack until he turned a page, still upside down. Didn't even glance my way. I took the coffee and went back to the room. Mallory was getting dressed when I walked in. I told her about the guy in the newspaper. She laughed at first, but her face changed when she realized I wasn't joking. We decided to check out early, just didn't feel like staying anymore. I went to warm up the car while she settled the bill. When she came out, she said the guy had followed her out of the lobby and stood just outside the front door while she got into the car. Didn't say anything, didn't even hold the door, just walked behind her, stopped, and stared. He didn't follow us when we left, at least not that we saw. On the drive back, we didn't talk about it much. Every time we tried, it just felt off, like the words didn't quite land. I remember Mallory saying, "Let's just get home." And that was that. Later that week, I went back to look at my dashcam footage from that night. I'd left it running by accident. It captured the drive-in, the parked timestamp, and then nothing. Blank screen for 2 hours. Then it picked back up when we started driving out again. I checked the file details. The missing time wasn't erased. It was just black. No audio, no video, just dead air. I still have the note. It's in my glove compartment. It started with a paper I was writing for my modern American myth course. I'm not even that into UFOs or anything. I just picked the topic because I thought it'd be easy to find sources and weird enough to keep me interested. The professor, Dr. Luring, said we had to tie the myth to a... So I settled on the 1977 Broadbrook sightings, a cluster of reports in upstate Connecticut. My school's only a couple hours from there. I dug into local archives, library, newspaper reels, old message boards. It was mostly just fuzzy lights and second-hand stories. Nothing that different from the usual. A couple of farmers said their cows acted strange. Someone swore their watch stopped for exactly 40 minutes. That kind of thing. But what caught my attention were these brief mentions in two of the old articles, like barely more than a sentence, about a pair of federal men visiting locals afterward. They weren't described, not even named, just sort of dropped in there. I figured it was probably just local cops or reporters exaggerating, but I made a note to look into it anyway. The following weekend, I emailed a few regional historians. One of them, some guy named Vince Halbrook, responded and pointed me to a microfilm archive in Springfield. I was planning to drive up that Friday. Then I got the email. It hit my inbox Tuesday night around 8:20 p.m. I was sitting at my desk in the dorm, finishing up some notes and half watching TV with my roommate Aaron. The sender was listed as Dr. Harlan Oakes from an address I didn't recognize. Oakes.faculty@son.ed. I'd never heard of him. The subject line was just stop. The body of the email said, "You are looking in the wrong places. There are things that are not meant to be named. Move on. This is your only warning." No greeting, no signature, no attachments, just that. I looked up Southern University of New Hampshire, and there was no Dr. Tor, Southern University of New Hampshire. Harlan Oakes listed on their staff directory. I checked the email headers, and it looked legit. No signs of spoofing. It had passed through normal campus filters. I told Aaron and showed him the message. He just shrugged and said, "Someone was messing with me. Probably someone in class who knew about my topic." I figured maybe he was right. About 5 minutes later, maybe less, the fire alarm went off. Not just ours, but the whole dorm building. Loud, shrill, strobing red lights. Everyone groaned and started heading out into the courtyard. It was cold. Early March, wet pavement, a little wind. Everyone stood around in sweats and hoodies. Then, I noticed them. 2 men across the street just standing there. They weren't talking. Not to each other, not to anyone, just still. Both wore black suits, black coats over them, but short, not overcoats. Dark ties. One had on sunglasses, even though it was full dark. The other didn't. Their hands were at their sides. They weren't taking pictures. No phones, no gestures, and they weren't looking at the building. They were looking at me directly, at me. I glanced around to see if anyone else noticed, but people were busy talking, scrolling their phones, joking around. No one else seemed to be looking across the street. Aaron was standing next to me, scrolling Instagram. I nudged him and said, "Hey, look at those guys." He turned, but they were gone. Just like that. No footsteps, no cars, just gone. When we got let back in, I checked my email again. The message from Dr. Dentara, email again. The message from Dr. Dentara, Oakes was gone. Not in my inbox, not in trash, not in sent. Not in archived. I checked every folder. Nothing. I even ran a search on my laptop for the subject line. No hits. The next morning, I went to the campus IT help desk and asked if they could look up a deleted email. They told me that messages deleted from both inbox and trash after retrieval were non-reoverable, unless you had admin access. They asked if I had the sender's address. I gave it to them. 10 minutes later, the guy came back and said that email had never passed through the university servers. There was no record of any message to or from that address on any domain connected to SUN. I dropped it after that, switched my paper topic to something about Elvis sightings in the 80s. It didn't feel like a coincidence, and every time I walked to class for the rest of the semester, I kept checking over my shoulder and her I was driving through the Mojave Desert late one night, trying to get from Las Vegas back to LA. My car was low on gas and the sun had been down for hours. The highway stretched out in front of me, just dark asphalt cutting through the emptiness with nothing but scrub and cacti on either side. I wasn't in a rush, but the silence and the vastness started to get to me after a while. Around 1 a.m., I spotted someone standing on the shoulder up ahead, waving like they needed help. At first, I thought it might be someone who'd broken down or needed a ride. It was odd because it was just miles of empty desert and no other cars in sight for a good stretch. The figure looked like a man dressed in a black suit, standing completely still. When I got closer, I slowed down, ready to offer help or at least see what was going on. But as I passed, the guy didn't move his arms like someone waving for help. He just held his hand up, palm out like a rigid signal. His face was expressionless, almost blank. I couldn't make out details, but there was something off about him, like he wasn't fully there, or like he was watching me in a way that didn't feel human. I felt a chill despite the desert heat. I didn't stop. The moment I passed him, my GPS glitched. The screen flickered, then went black for a second, and when it came back on, the route had reset. Instead of continuing to LA, it redirected me back toward the same spot I just passed. I thought it was a glitch and tried to punch in my destination again. But every time I entered it, the GPS kept rerouting me in a loop, leading me right back to that stretch of highway right where the man had been standing. I pulled over and shut off the car to check my phone for signal, but there was none. No bars, no Wi-Fi. It was like I'd been cut off from everything. I thought maybe the car's system was just acting up and rebooted it, but nothing changed. The GPS insisted on sending me back to that exact place. After sitting there for a few minutes, I noticed the desert had gone unnaturally quiet. No crickets, no wind, no cars, just silence. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear and full of stars. I turned on my headlights and scanned the shoulder again. No one was there. No sign the man had ever been. I started to feel the edge of panic creeping in. Eventually, I forced myself to start driving again, ignoring the GPS. I took a side road I recognized from a map earlier, hoping it would get me out of the loop. Hours later, I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town. I was exhausted and shaken, but told myself I was just tired and stressed. I tried to put it out of my head. Then, just after midnight, the phone in my room rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. A voice spoke on the other end. Calm, cold, and strangely calm. You were right not to stop, it said. Not everyone is. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a long time before hanging up. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, my GPS worked fine again. I left the motel heading home, but I kept thinking about that figure on the side of the road, the loop, and the call. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I'm glad I didn't stop. I was driving home late one Sunday night after spending the weekend at my friend Emma's cabin up in the Cascades. It was early November, the kind of cold where you can see your breath, but the roads hadn't iced over yet. I left Emma's place around 10:30 p.m., wanting to get back to Seattle before it got too late. The drive from the cabin to the highway is mostly winding forest roads, tall firs on both sides, and not much else. The moon was barely out, and the sky was clear, except for this weird thin layer of fog hanging low over the trees. I was listening to an old playlist on the radio, some classic rock station that comes in and out up there. About 20 minutes into the drive, the signal started to cut out, not in the usual way. The music would pause for a few seconds, then come back, but louder, like a burst of static, followed by a jarring spike in volume. Then the radio went totally dead. Just static. I flipped through the stations, hoping to catch anything, but every channel was the same. Dead silence except for static. That's when I noticed something else. Above the tree line off to my right, there was this single light. It was bright but weirdly soft, like a glowing orb, maybe the size of a car's headlight, but not harsh. The thing is, it wasn't moving like a plane or a drone or anything normal. It was moving so slow, it almost didn't move at all. I kept watching it, expecting it to move across the sky, but after 5 minutes it was basically in the same spot. I blinked, looked away, and then back, and it was still there, drifting maybe an inch or two in the sky. No blinking lights, no sounds, nothing. Just this hovering, slow-moving glow. I tried to tell myself it was probably a helicopter or a weather balloon, or even a drone someone was flying. But the speed was wrong and the silence was too complete. Usually with any machine, you'd hear the hum or see the blinking navigation lights. The road was empty. No other cars for miles. My phone was out of signal range, so I couldn't call or check maps. I just kept driving, my eyes glued to the light. Every now and then it seemed to pulse like it brightened and dimmed, but not in any regular pattern. I wanted to look away, but it felt like I couldn't. After about 15 minutes, I finally pulled off at the next gas station, a little place called Maples Fuel. One of those old-fashioned stations with a convenience store and a handful of pumps lit by flickering neon. I needed to use the bathroom and get a coffee to wake up. And honestly, I needed to clear my head. When I stepped out of the car, the cold air hit me. And for a moment, the light was visible again above the trees from the parking lot. It was just there hanging in the sky. As I was filling my tank, a man in a dark suit approached the pump next to mine. He was maybe in his late 40s, clean-shaven, and had this calm, unshakable look. Nothing flashy about him, just a plain black suit and tie, like he'd come straight from an office or some kind of agency. He glanced at me and said quietly, "Some lights are meant to be ignored." That line caught me off guard. I blinked and asked, "What?" He shrugged like it was nothing, leaned a little on the pump and said, "You saw too, didn't you?" I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, and he gave me a half smile, then turned and walked into the store. I watched him go inside, but the door swung shut behind him with a kind of mechanical clang that felt out of place. Inside, I grabbed a coffee and waited, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I glanced out the window, and the light was gone. The sky was dark and empty. I asked the cashier if anyone had been hanging around or if they'd noticed anything strange lately. She shrugged, said, "People come and go all the time, but nothing out of the ordinary." When I got back to the car, I looked up again. The light didn't come back. I figured it was time to finish the drive home. The rest of the way, I kept checking the sky through my windshield, half expecting it to show up again, but nothing. When I finally got home, the house was quiet, and I shut the door behind me, feeling this weird weight settle in my chest. I never told Emma or anyone else what I saw or what the man said. It just felt like something too strange to explain. Sometimes I think about that light, the way it didn't move like anything I've ever seen, and the man's words echo in my head. I don't know what it was or what the man meant by "some lights are meant to be ignored." But since that night, I've never looked at the sky quite the same. The clearing was silent except for the faint hum of cicadas and the rustle of dry leaves. I've been out there since dawn, walking the perimeter, taking notes on the bear activity around this part of the forest. It was late September in northern Minnesota, and the air had that crisp edge that meant fall was creeping in, but hadn't quite settled yet. I was used to the quiet, but that morning felt different, like something had shifted. I was about to pack up and head back to the research station when I noticed something strange in the clearing. A series of perfectly round scorch marks in the dirt arranged in an odd pattern. They were about 2 feet across, each, maybe 6 or 7 of them in a rough circle about 15 feet in diameter. The marks were deeply embedded in the earth, the soil beneath blackened and cracked. But oddly, no trees or plants seemed to have been affected around the edges. No branches snapped, no leaves burned, just those scorch marks, clean and symmetrical like someone had pressed a giant hot cookie cutter into the ground. I stared at them for a while, trying to figure out if it was some kind of natural phenomenon, but it didn't make sense. Nothing I'd ever read about or seen in the field matched those marks. I circled them slowly, checking for tracks or anything else. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of campfire or human activity, just the scorched earth. I took photos, made sketches, and took samples of the soil. I flagged the location on my GPS and radioed back to the station with a brief description. The team thought it might be some kind of lightning strike or an animal marking territory, but the shape and symmetry didn't fit. The forest that day was quiet, too quiet, and I felt like I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was nothing there. A few days later, just after lunch, there was a knock on the station's door. It was one of those old research cabins, nothing fancy. Wood walls, a small kitchen, a single room where I did my work. I wasn't expecting visitors, so I opened the door cautiously. A man was standing there, tall, wearing a plain black suit that looked out of place in the middle of the woods. No badge, no name tag, nothing identifying him. His eyes were dark and steady, and when he spoke, his voice was flat but calm. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said. That was it. No small talk, no introduction, just that line. I blinked, trying to place him, but he hadn't mentioned any agency or reason for being there. I told him about the scorch marks, showed him the photos on my camera, He looked at them closely, but didn't react much. Then he asked detailed questions about my work, the animals I tracked, the data I collected, stuff that seemed oddly specific, but not threatening. I found myself getting nervous. The way he moved, how his gaze didn't waver, like he was analyzing every word, every reaction. He didn't ask for directions or how to get to the clearing, but somehow he knew exactly where it was. I offered to take him there, partly because I wanted to get him out of the cabin, and partly to see if he'd reveal anything. He declined politely, saying he had his own methods. He stayed for almost an hour, then left without another word. I watched him walk away through the trees, his steps almost too quiet for the soft forest floor. After he left, I double-axe checked my equipment, my locks, everything. Nothing was missing, but the feeling that something wasn't right lingered. In the days that followed, the scorch marks kept showing up in my mind. The silence of that clearing, the man's unnerving calm, the way he seemed to know things without asking. I kept going back to the clearing when I could, always looking for changes, new marks, anything unusual, but nothing ever appeared again. Still, some nights when the wind rustled the trees just right, I swear I can hear a low hum, not like any animal or machine I know, just a faint vibration under the skin of the forest. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that one visit, and a feeling that whatever was out there wasn't interested in me, but it was watching. I was up early around 5 a.m. because I'm the kind of person who likes to catch the river when it's calm, especially in late spring around Seattle. I'd taken my usual walk along the Green River Trail, the one that runs just a couple blocks from my place in Keeler. It's quiet at that hour, mostly just the sound of water and the occasional bird waking up. That day it was foggy, thick, low-hanging mist that made everything look soft and kind of blurry. I was walking, hands in my jacket pockets, eyes mostly on the path, when I noticed this weird glow just over the water. It wasn't the sun, too early for sunlight, and the sky was still grey and clouded. The glow was low, maybe 10 feet above the river's surface, moving slowly upstream against the current. At first, I thought it might be a reflection of some fishing lights or a boat, but there was no boat, no sound, nothing usual, just this pale blue-green light hovering, shifting gently, like it was floating on the mist itself. I stopped and stared, blinking a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining things. There was no noise, no buzzing, no humming, nothing. Just that strange, steady glow moving slowly along the water, barely making a ripple. It felt like the whole river was holding its breath. I didn't get closer. Something about it felt wrong. Like disturbing it would be a bad idea. So, I kept walking, glancing back every so often until the fog swallowed the light completely. That was around 5:15 a.m. I got home around 6, sleepy, but wanting coffee. When I pulled up in front of my small townhouse, the front door was slightly ajar, just cracked open enough that I could see the inside from the street. My heart jumped. I live alone. I always lock the door, especially at night. I stood frozen for a moment, not trying to think what to do. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no voices. The neighborhood was still dead quiet except for distant cars on the main road. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and texted my brother Mark. Doors open. Don't come over or anything, but I might need you to check this out. He's a cop, so I figured if something was wrong, he'd know what to do. Then I slowly pushed the door open the rest of the way and stepped inside. Nothing looked out of place. No drawers open, no mess. The couch cushions were where I left them. The TV was off. The only weird thing was the clocks. Every clock in the house, wall clock in the kitchen, alarm clock on my bedside table, even the microwave, all read 3:33. That creeped me out. Not because of the numbers exactly, but because I know the clocks don't keep perfect time. They're usually off by a few minutes here and there. The fact that every single one stopped at exactly 3:33 made no sense. I thought maybe the power had gone out briefly overnight, but none of the lights were flickering, and my phone was fully charged with no warnings. I called Mark, told him what was up. He said he'd swing by after his shift in the afternoon, but I told him it probably wasn't urgent. I spent the day double-checking the locks, changing the code on the front door keypad, and moving around the house more than usual. The quiet felt different now, heavier somehow, like the air was thicker. That evening around 7 o'clock, I took my usual walk through the neighborhood park just across the street from my place. There was a man sitting on the bench at the far end, near the playground. He looked out of place, wearing a black suit, the kind you'd expect at a funeral or a business meeting, not a suburban park on a Tuesday night. He was reading a newspaper. I didn't think much of it until I got closer and realized the paper was completely blank. No text, no photos, just white pages folded neatly. I slowed down and looked at him for a few seconds. He glanced up, eyes dark and unreadable, then looked back down at the paper. "Evening," I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond. I felt this weird chill run down my spine. The air around him seemed colder. I nodded politely and kept walking. Once I was home, I locked every door twice and checked the windows again. Over the next few days, nothing else strange happened. No lights on the river, no unlocked doors, no silent readers on benches. But every time I looked at my clocks, I caught myself glancing at them longer than usual. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the couch or making coffee, I get this feeling like someone's watching me from just outside the window, even though I don't see anyone. I don't know what I saw on the river that morning or why my door was unlocked when I got home, but it all feels connected. I haven't told anyone else. I'm not sure I want to. The first thing that felt off was the silence. Me and Mike had been out camping in the White Mountains for a couple of nights. Nothing special, just some beers, the usual stuff, a little hiking during the day. The sky was clear that night, cold but clear. We'd built a fire near the clearing where we pitched our tents, and around midnight we decided to just lay back and watch the stars. That's when we noticed the light. At first it was just a faint glow above the trees, kind of like the way the moon sometimes throws shadows on the treetops. But this was different. It was a narrow beam, kind of like a flashlight or a searchlight, moving slowly side to side, sweeping over the pine branches. What was weird was there was no sound, no hum of a helicopter or drone, no motor noise, nothing. It just glided through the air, scanning the forest like it was looking for something. Mike nudged me, whispering, "What the hell is that?" I shook my head, but I didn't have an answer. We watched it for maybe 5 minutes, the light moving smooth and steady. Every now and then it caught on a branch or the bark of a tree casting strange shadows. Then it stopped. Just stopped, hovering there, maybe 50 feet above the treetops, shining straight down. And then, after a few seconds, it just blinked out like someone switched off a flashlight. We looked at each other, both kind of frozen. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. Mike shook his head. "Nothing." We didn't say much after that. The silence was heavy, like something was pressing on us from the woods around us. Neither of us was ready to talk about it. The next day, we tried to figure out if it was some Park Service thing, or maybe some drone test. We called the ranger station, but they said no one had anything scheduled for that area. No notices, no reports. Weeks passed. We didn't bring it up. It was like we both wanted to pretend it never happened. Then about 3 months later, I got the email. The sender was just listed as control, no name, no address, just that word. The subject line was blank. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short message, just one sentence. "No need to share what you never understood." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, not sure what to do. A little while later, Mike texted me, same thing. He'd gotten the same email from the same sender. Neither of us had any clue who it was. I didn't tell anyone else, not my family, not my co-workers. It felt like some kind of message meant only for us. Sometimes I think back to that night, the quiet, the beam, the way it moved without sound. What were we supposed to understand? What were they scanning for? I don't know, and maybe that's the point. I was driving back from a week-long trip through the Mojave Desert trying to clear my head. My name's Eric and I work in software support, so sitting behind a screen all day means I usually need to get outside now and then. This trip was mostly just me, my old Jeep, and a map. No real plan, just driving through empty places, staying off the main highways as much as I could. On the last night, I was somewhere near Baker, California, coming back toward the 15th. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the sky was that deep blue you only get in the desert at dusk. The air had cooled down, but the heat from the day still hung close to the ground. The roads were nearly empty, just me and the headlights cutting through the dark. About 40 miles outside Baker, I noticed a car behind me. It was a black sedan, something pretty standard looking. No logos or anything. I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of the driver's face once, just a blurry shape like a man, but I couldn't make out features. I figured maybe it was coincidence, just someone driving the same way. But I kept getting this uneasy feeling. I sped up, thinking maybe I was imagining things, or maybe they'd just passed me. But the car stayed right there, matching my speed perfectly. I slowed down, then sped up again. Still there. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe they were lost or something. But the more I tried to lose them, the closer they seemed. I turned off the highway onto a smaller road leading to a gas station, thinking I'd wait and see if they pulled in too. The black sedan stopped about 20 yards behind me, engine idling. I got out and started filling my tank, keeping an eye on the car. The driver stayed still, watching me. When I finished, I climbed back into my Jeep and thought about just driving off, but something held me there. I wasn't sure what, but it was like I couldn't just leave, so I waited. After a minute or two, the passenger window on the black sedan rolled down slowly, making a quiet hiss in the otherwise silent night. A man's face appeared in the window, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a black suit and a dark shirt. His eyes were calm but sharp, and he didn't smile. "You saw something you shouldn't," he said, voice low but clear. I blinked, surprised. "I don't know what you mean. Drive carefully from now on," he said. Then the window rolled up, and the car pulled away, disappearing into the dark like it had just melted into the night. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what just happened. I hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary during my trip, or at least nothing I'd admit to seeing. But that look in his eyes and the way he spoke left no doubt he was serious. I didn't follow him or try to chase. I just started my Jeep and drove home, looking over my shoulder the whole way. I don't know if it was a warning or a threat, but ever since then, I've been more aware of the quiet things, the shadows moving just out of sight, the distant humming in the desert night. I don't tell people about it much. It feels like one of those things you keep to yourself because no one really believes you, or if they do, they look at you differently. But sometimes late at night, I swear I see headlights far off on the horizon, and I wonder if that black sedan is still out there somewhere watching. I was working the late shift at Millie's Diner in Ashland, Oregon when it happened. It was a slow night, the kind where the only regulars are the night owls and a few truckers passing through. The diner itself is this old roadside place, the kind with neon signs that buzz quietly in booths with cracked vinyl seats. I've worked there for a few years now. Name's Dan. And on nights like that, I usually just keep to myself, wiping down tables and making coffee. That night, it was raining lightly outside, the kind of steady drizzle that makes the windows fogged up and blurs the neon glow. Around 11 p.m., two men walked in. Both wore black suits, the kind you'd expect at a funeral or maybe some shady business meeting. One was tall with slicked back hair, and the other was shorter, older, with thin glasses and a permanent frown. They sat in the booth by the window and ordered black coffee. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard them start talking. The words weren't loud, but there was something about the way they spoke that made me lean closer while wiping a nearby table. They weren't talking about the usual small stuff. No weather, no politics. They were discussing something about controlling the narrative and managing the fallout related to a recent sighting. The town had been buzzing a few days before about a strange light hovering over the old radio tower on the hill. People had called it a UFO, but no one had proof or any clear footage. The news was already trying to sweep it under the rug, but these two were clearly involved in whatever was going on. I kept wiping tables, but tried not to make it obvious I was listening. Then the tall guy glanced toward me. I froze for a second, caught mid-wipe. He didn't say anything, but leaned in toward the other man and lowered his voice even more. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said. Their eyes met mine, cold and sharp, and that was enough for me to nod and say, "Got it." Like I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. They finished their coffee quickly and left without a word. I remember watching them disappear into the rain, their coats pulled tight, the street lights reflecting off the wet pavement. After they left, the diner felt different. The usual hum of the place felt quieter, almost like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Not in a spooky way, but like I'd stumbled into something bigger than a couple of guys talking. The next morning, the news didn't mention the light at all. The radio tower was back to being just an old piece of junk on the hill. But I kept thinking about those men and their warning. I've never told anyone else about it, mostly because no one would believe a late-night diner story. But sometimes when it rains and the neon lights blur just right, I swear I see shadows standing by that tower, watching, waiting. I was about halfway through a solo camping trip in northern Vermont when the weird stuff started. I didn't go out there looking for anything strange, just wanted some quiet, some time away from the city. I figured it'd be just me in the woods for a few days, which sounded perfect. I picked a spot deep in the forest off a little logging road about 10 miles from the nearest town. It wasn't a designated campsite, just a flat clearing I found on a map near a creek. I set up my tent late afternoon, had a fire going by sunset, and spent the night reading and listening to the forest settle in. The first night was cold but normal. I woke a few times, heard the usual night sounds, crickets, owls, the wind through the pines, nothing out of place. The second day I hiked a bit, didn't see anyone else. When I got back to my site late afternoon, there was a faint smell in the air, kind of like burnt rubber or something chemical. I thought maybe a truck had passed nearby or something, but the road was quiet. No cars or trucks had come by all day as far as I could tell. I shrugged it off and settled in for the night. I was tired and didn't think much of the smell again. Around 4 a.m. the next morning, I woke up suddenly to the sound of rustling leaves right outside my tent. Not just animals. This was heavier, like someone walking slowly and carefully through brush. My heart jumped. I froze and waited, ears straining in the dark, then silence. The kind of silence that feels too deep. I stayed still for a while, but didn't hear anything else. When dawn broke, I unzipped my tent to let in some light. That's when I saw it. A small note pinned to the tent flap. It was a simple scrap of notebook paper folded over and stuck there with a small twig through the middle. I picked it up. Written in messy block letters was, "Go home." I looked around but didn't see anyone. The woods were quiet. My skin prickled. Then just past the edge of the clearing near the tree, I noticed a car, a black sedan, idling. The engine was running soft, steady hum, but no one was inside. The windows were rolled up and the interior looked empty. I scanned the area, expecting maybe the owner was nearby or hiding behind a tree, but no one. I called out, but my voice felt weird in the open space. No response, no movement from the car. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be scared or confused. The whole thing was like one of those movies where you just want to run but you're frozen in place. I started walking toward the car slowly, trying to see if someone was hidden, or maybe it was just abandoned. When I got closer, within 15 feet, the engine cut off just like that. No noise, no warning. I stopped and stared. The silence came back thick and heavy. I scanned the tree line behind the car, looking for footprints or tire marks that might tell me how it got there. Nothing. No tracks in the dirt, no crushed grass, no signs it had driven in recently. It didn't add up. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but no signal. I tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed something else. The woods beyond the car looked different. Not physically, but the light. There was a weird haze, like a thin fog, but only around that section of trees. It didn't move or change, just hung there like a curtain. I shook my head, trying to clear the unease creeping over me. I decided to leave. I grabbed my pack and started, walking back toward my tent, glancing over my shoulder. No sign of anyone or anything. By the time I got back, the note was gone. No sign it had ever been there. My tent flap was zipped tight again, just like I'd left it. I tried to convince myself maybe I'd imagined the note or it had fallen off the flap somehow, but the memory of the car and the silence around it felt too real. I packed up fast after that. The weird smell was back, faint but there. I kept looking over my shoulder the whole time. When I got back to my truck parked several hundred yards down the logging road, I looked into the rear-view mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw headlights coming through the trees behind me, but when I turned around, nothing was there. I drove straight back to town, not stopping until I hit the main highway. I told a few friends later, but they brushed it off. Probably some prank or wildlife, or just nerves. I don't know. I've been back to that area a couple times since, but never near that clearing. I haven't seen the black car again or that note. But every time I think about it, that quiet engine running with no one inside, and the note on my tent, it just doesn't make sense. I was driving through Red Rock Canyon on a Tuesday evening just past sunset. The kind of evening where the sky still holds onto some light, but the shadows start stretching long and dark, and the temperature begins to drop quick. I was heading home from a work trip in Vegas. Took the scenic route to clear my head. Never been a fan of the freeway if I can help it. The canyon roads narrow and winding, flanked by those steep sandstone cliffs. And at this time of year, there's barely anyone else out there. Just me and the road. It was around 7:30 when I noticed a car parked just past a sharp bend. One of those old black sedans with no plates. Not something you see every day in the fog, middle of nowhere. I slowed down, expecting maybe a roadblock or construction, but there were no signs, no cones, nothing official. That's when the two guys stepped out, both wearing black suits, dark sunglasses, even though the sun was dipping low. One was tall, maybe early 40s, the other shorter, late 30s. They walked right up to my window like they'd been waiting. The tall one didn't smile, just said, "Road ahead is closed for maintenance. You'll have to turn back." I blinked, glanced up the road, saw nothing unusual. No workers, no barriers, no equipment. Maintenance, I said. I didn't see any signs. A private job, the shorter one said flatly. No exceptions. I wasn't in the mood to argue. "I've got to get through," I said. "I'm trying to get home." The tall guy shook his head. "We can't let you through. It's not safe." I glanced up the road again. The canyon was empty. No lights, no sounds, nothing but quiet rocks and that fading sky. I looked back at their car. It was completely black. No windows I could see through, no license plates, no markings at all. Felt off, but I kept my voice steady. "How long is this maintenance?" "Indefinite," the shorter man said. I looked back up the road again, then back at them, feeling an odd chill creep in. "Is there a detour?" "No," the tall one said. "You have to turn around." I sighed and started to back up slowly. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror just in case. When I looked again, both of them were already back in their car. The sedan started to move, but as I shifted gears, I looked back over my shoulder. The car was gone. No sound of an engine, no lights, nothing. Just empty road and the canyon walls. No tire marks, no sign they'd even been there. I stopped for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe they'd moved to block the road up ahead, so I started creeping forward, looking carefully. No barriers, no equipment, nothing unusual. I pulled over on a wider spot, stepped out to look around. The canyon quiet, except for the occasional rustle of dry brush in the wind. I checked my phone, no signal. I walked a bit up the road and back, looking for tracks or anything that could explain the sudden vanishing act. There was nothing. I sat back in my car, took a deep breath, and started driving back the way I came. The sky had darkened to a deep blue now, and the first stars were starting to peek out. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed a light in the sky, a faint glow, low and steady, just above the canyon rim. It wasn't a plane or helicopter. It didn't move like one, just hung there, glowing softly, almost like a lantern someone had set down in the sky. I blinked a few times, rubbed my eyes, but it stayed. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road, but the light seemed to follow me, staying just at the edge of my vision. I stopped at the small diner at the canyon entrance. The place was empty except for the night cook, an older guy named Sam. I told him what happened, half expecting a laugh. Sam didn't say much, just nodded slowly. "You're not the first one to see things like that out here," he said. "Like what?" I asked. He shrugged. "Lights, figures, roads that close up without a trace." I left the diner with a sour feeling, paid, and headed home. The whole way back I kept glancing in my mirrors, half expecting to see the black sedan or the two men again, but the road was empty. When I got home, I checked the news and the county road updates. Nothing about closures or maintenance on the canyon road. Just the usual warnings about loose rocks and narrow lanes. I went to bed that night thinking about the men, the empty road, and the strange light. Over the next few days, I kept checking for anything else out of place. I told a few friends about the encounter. Some joked about government agents or aliens, but I wasn't sure what to think. The weirdest part, a couple days after, I found a small scrap of paper folded under my windshield wiper. It was blank. I folded it back up, left it on the dashboard, and haven't touched it since. It started a couple of weeks ago, just after sunset on one of those cool early autumn evenings when the air feels sharp and the sky's clear. I'd been out on the dock by the lake behind my place, just sitting there with my phone trying to take some pictures of the stars coming out. It was quiet, peaceful, the usual. I was scrolling through my shots when I noticed something strange. Off toward the middle of the lake, just above the water, there was this shape, like a dark silhouette hovering. It wasn't moving like a bird or a plane. It just stayed there, completely still. No blinking lights, no sound, nothing. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light or some weird cloud, but the shape was solid, sharp against the sky. I aimed my phone camera at it and zoomed in as best as I could. It was smooth, kind of oval, but it wasn't shiny or reflective, just matte black. I kept watching, and after a few minutes, it slowly began to drift sideways, just a few feet at a time. Then, without any noise or sudden movement, it shot straight up and disappeared into the darkness. I blinked, feeling kind of unnerved, but mostly curious. I wasn't sure what I'd just seen. I stayed out a while longer, but the lake went back to normal. Quiet, empty, just the occasional fish jumping. The next morning, I found a black car parked at the very end of my driveway. It was one of those older models, like from the early 2000s. Nothing flashy, but in perfect condition. Clean, no dents, no license plate. I thought maybe a neighbor's visitor or something. But here's the thing. There were no tire tracks leading up to it, and no footprints anywhere nearby. The gravel looked untouched. I checked the windows, but it was empty. No one inside, no keys in the ignition. I figured someone had parked there overnight and walked away. Maybe the owner was nearby. So I left it alone. The next morning, same thing. That car, same spot, same no footprints, no tire tracks. I started feeling kind of uneasy, but didn't tell anyone because who'd believe it? By the fourth day, the car was still there. Every morning I started leaving a note on the windshield asking if the owner could move it. But the note never disappeared, and the car never moved. It just sat there, silent and black. One evening a few days later, I was sitting on my porch after dinner, and I heard footsteps on the gravel. I looked up and saw a man standing near the end of the driveway. He was wearing a black suit, nothing fancy, but neat, and his face was mostly in shadow from the streetlight. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching me. I got up and walked toward him, kind of nervous. "Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, he said, "The water remembers." I blinked. "What?" he repeated. "The water remembers." Before I could say anything else, he turned and walked away down the road, disappearing into the darkness. I ran inside and locked the door. For the rest of the night, I kept looking out the window, though, but he didn't come back. Over the next week, the car kept appearing every morning, but the man never returned. I started noticing other little things. My phone would sometimes show static or strange glitches when I tried to take pictures of the lake. Sometimes late at night, I'd hear a faint humming sound coming from the water, but when I went outside, it stopped. One night I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw faint lights flickering over the lake. They were different from the first time, a soft blue glow, pulsing slowly. I grabbed my phone and pointed it out the window, but the screen just went black, then showed the camera like it was frozen. When I looked up again, the lights were gone. I haven't seen the man since that night on the porch, and the car stopped showing up too. But sometimes when I'm near the water, I get this feeling like I'm being watched, like something's just below the surface waiting. And the memory of those words, "the water remembers," keeps playing over and over in my head. I don't know why I decided to go out to the old airfield that night. It wasn't anything planned. Just one of those spur-of-the-moment things. The place has been shut down for years. Just some cracked runways and empty hangars out near Milltown, a small town in western Kansas. I'd driven past it plenty of times and thought it might be a good spot for shooting the sky at night. There's almost no light pollution out there, so stars are supposed to be crazy bright. I got there around 10 p.m. on a Friday. The wind was light but steady, and the sky was clear, the kind of cold and dry air you get in early spring nights. I had my old camcorder with me, the one I'd used a bunch back in college before phones took over. I set it up on a tripod at the edge of the main runway and started filming the horizon, hoping to catch something interesting. Meteors, satellites, airplanes, whatever. I'd been filming for about an hour, just watching the screen and waiting, when I noticed something weird. About halfway up in the sky, there were these lights, slower moving, kind of pulsing, and they didn't look like planes or helicopters. No blinking red or green, no sound, just these round lights drifting in patterns I couldn't really describe. They moved silently, sometimes flickering, sometimes disappearing completely, and then reappearing a little further away. I wasn't scared at first, more like curious. I started zooming in with the camcorder, trying to get a better look. The lights seemed to keep changing positions, almost like they were watching me back. After a while, I noticed the temperature felt colder, like the air around me was different. But the wind hadn't really changed. That's when I saw the figure. Out of the corner of my eye, something moved behind the rusted chain-link fence that separated the runway from the old service road. It was a man dressed in a black suit that looked out of place for the middle of nowhere and the middle of the night. No tie, just a black jacket and slacks standing perfectly still in the shadows. I turned off the camcorder screen and squinted, trying to get a better look. I called out, "Hey, can I help you?" But the man didn't respond or move. I felt a weird chill go down my spine, but I kept my voice calm. "Are you lost or something?" Then, without a word, the man stepped through the fence. He didn't make any noise, climbing over or walking. He just appeared closer, still silent, still expressionless. I held up my camcorder, but didn't start recording again. Something about him made me hesitate. He stopped maybe 6 feet away and reached into his jacket pocket. Slowly, he pulled out a single piece of paper and handed it to me. I looked down at it. It was completely blank. No writing, no symbols, nothing. I blinked and looked up, about to ask what the hell this was supposed to mean. But when I looked back, the man was gone. No footprints, no sound, no sign he'd been there at all. I turned back to the sky, but the lights were gone too. The whole sky was empty, like they'd never been there. I stayed out for a while longer, trying to shake off the feeling that I'd just been part of something I didn't understand. When I finally got back in my car, I looked down at the paper again, still blank. I kept it in my jacket pocket, but it never changed, and I never found anything written on it. Back at home, I checked the footage. The camcorder had recorded everything, the strange lights moving, and then the sudden silence when the man appeared, but there was no sign of the paper or the moment he gave it to me. It was like the camera missed that part completely. I told a couple of friends, but they just laughed it off as a prank or my imagination. Even now, I don't know what I saw or who that man was. I don't think I'll ever go back to that airfield, but sometimes when I'm outside at night, I swear I see lights moving just out of the corner of my eye watching. I'm not someone who usually chases weird stuff. I mean, I like a good mystery as much as the next guy, but I don't go looking for trouble. That night changed something, though. It wasn't a bright flash or a loud boom, just quiet, strange things that didn't add up. I lived just outside a small town in Ohio near one of those old power plants they built in the 70s. Not exactly picturesque, but it's part of the scenery here. For years, I'd gone out shooting landscapes and night skies around the plant. Sometimes the big cooling towers with their steam clouds looked kind of eerie in the dark, and I liked capturing that. Nothing special, just a hobby. It was a Wednesday. I had the night off work and the sky was clear but colder than usual for spring. I took my camera and tripod and drove out to a spot a couple miles from the plant near the edge of the woods where I could get a good view. I was hoping for some decent long exposure shots of the stars and maybe the steam glowing under the moonlight. I set up and started snapping photos, waiting for the right moment. Nothing out of the ordinary for a while, just the usual hum of distant machinery and the occasional sound of a train far off. Then, around 11 p.m., I noticed something moving near the horizon behind the plant. At first, it looked like a faint glow, but then it shifted, slow, almost floating. I pointed my camera in that direction, zoomed in, and started taking pictures. The light moved erratically, pulsing dimly between blue and green. It didn't make any noise I could hear. I tried to focus, but the light kept flickering in and out. I took several shots, some in bursts. I even switched to video for a bit, just to see if the camera picked up more than my eyes could. The whole time I felt this weird prickling sensation on the back of my neck like something was watching me. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the night air. After about 10 minutes, the light vanished. No crash, no engine sound, nothing, just gone. I packed up, drove home, feeling a bit uneasy, but chalked it up to the cold and the weird light. The next day, I loaded the photos onto my computer to check them out. That's when the strange stuff really started. The pictures I took of the light, they were all gone. The files were there, but every one of them was corrupted. Just a blank black image. I tried everything. Different card readers, recovery software, even a different computer. Nothing. It was like those photos never existed. That freaked me out more than the light itself. That night I was sitting in my living room, looking at my camera bag, wondering if I should just forget the whole thing when there was a sharp knock at the door. I opened it cautiously. 2 men stood there, both in black suits, plain but expensive looking. Neither said hello or introduced themselves. One of them held out a business card, but when I looked closer, it was blank. The other spoke quietly, almost like they didn't want anyone else to hear. Some lights aren't meant to be captured. I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing. They didn't seem threatening, but there was this coldness about them, like they were serious about that warning. Without waiting for a response, they turned and walked away, disappearing down the street before I could even blink. I locked the door, checked all the windows, and sat down again, hands shaking. The card was still in my hand, blank, except for a faint smudge where the printing should have been. I never saw those men again. The photos of the light stayed missing, and since then I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched whenever I go near that power plant at night. The hum of the machinery sounds different, like it's trying to hide something. I don't know what that light was or who those men were. I don't even know if anyone else has seen anything like it. But I'm done taking pictures out there. Some things, I guess, really are better left unseen. I was asleep when the knock came. It was just past midnight, a soft but urgent tapping on my front door. I'd been out late, tired, and didn't expect anyone. So when I opened the door, it took me a second to register the 2 men standing there. Black suits, dark glasses. Even though it was night, and those expressionless faces you see in movies, they didn't introduce themselves, just said they needed to check my yard. I rubbed my eyes, half sure I was dreaming. My yard? What for? Routine inspection, one said, voice calm but firm for safety concerns. I didn't want to be rude, but it felt off. I hesitated. They looked like government types, but no badges, no IDs. Still, something about the way they spoke made me think arguing wasn't a good idea. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The air was cold, heavy with fog rolling in from the nearby river, and the streetlights were dim and flickering. The whole neighborhood was quiet. No cars, no sounds other than distant dogs barking. They moved fast. One of them started walking toward the backyard, eyes scanning. The other stayed by the door, watching me. I tried to peek over the fence to see what they were looking at, but all I saw was the garden, my old shed, and a few bushes. After a few minutes, the one in the yard called me over. "Please stay inside," he said. I blinked. Why? Standard procedure. His tone was polite but firm. I didn't argue. I locked the door again, feeling this weird knot in my stomach. I stood near the window and watched. The fog was thicker now, the dim light making everything blurry, like I was looking through a haze. They started pulling out what looked like bags from their coat pockets, heavy, black, like the kind used by forensic teams. One of them carefully approached something on the ground near the shed and started wrapping it up. I couldn't see what it was, but it looked small. They didn't say a word, just worked quickly, methodically. I wanted to call the police, but the moment I reached for my phone, the screen went black. No signal. Minutes passed like hours. The tension was unbearable. Then, just as silently as they'd arrived, the men in black walked back toward the front door. One nodded at me briefly, almost like a warning. Then they left. Their car wasn't there when they arrived, and it wasn't there when they left. I stepped outside, my breath visible in the cold air. The yard looked normal, nothing disturbed except for a faint scuff mark near the shed. No footprints, no sign of whatever they'd bagged. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That night, I didn't sleep. The fog outside thickened and stayed until dawn. The next day, I checked my yard thoroughly. Nothing missing, nothing strange, but that scuff mark stayed. I don't know what they were looking for or why they took it, but I can't shake the feeling that something else was out there watching me, waiting. And those 2 men, I've never seen them again. I was walking home late one night, just minding my own business. The street was quiet, a little foggy, and the kind of night where everything feels a bit off, but you can't quite say why. As I got near the end of the block, I noticed a black car parked by the curb, It wasn't the car itself that caught my attention, it was what was inside. There were two men sitting in the front seats, both wearing black suits and those old-fashioned top hats. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of costume or weird prank. But then I looked closer. Their faces weren't faces. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, featureless skin, like someone had erased their faces entirely. I froze for a second, then kept walking faster this time. I tried not to look back, but curiosity got the better of me after a few steps. When I glanced over my shoulder, the car was gone. No lights, no engine sound, no tire marks, nothing. Just the empty street under the fog. I don't know who those men were, or what that car was doing there. I've never seen anything like it before since. It's been bothering me ever since.